Chapter 798 Demon Skeletons. Apparently, I wrote some chapters and have torn them apart, Michael joked. True, but you got new pages to write something different this time, said the woman. You didn't tell me who you are. At least tell me why you are here. The woman stopped floating toward the realm tear. Instead, she turned her calm gaze at Michael. Her gaze swept across the ocean around them. Michael felt a strange energy pulse followed by a ripple in the ocean. You won't be bothered by the creatures anymore. The woman's words surprised Michael. Although he still had to test her words, he didn't think she was lying. After all, she did not need to lie to him about anything. Also, Michael, her gaze fell on Michael once again. Michael felt like her gaze was piercing his soul itself. Every family will have its share of flaws, but just one family is what we have, said the woman. Her gentle words echoed through the sky. Before Michael could ask her anything else, she vanished into thin air. System, what do you think about her? Any idea about her origins? Asked Michael. To Michael's surprise, the system went into complete silence. No matter how many times he asked, the system did not utter a word about the mysterious woman. After a while, Michael could only sigh and continue to fly toward the realm tear. On his way, he recalled her words. He still couldn't wrap his mind around the fact his past self actually lived 5,000 years ago. I must have been freakishly powerful, Michael mumbled under his breath. He saw no point in dwelling on the past. His past self made some mistakes, big ones it seemed, but it didn't mean he would make the same ones once again. In this life, he would go to any length to protect his loved ones. For instance, he promised himself to look after Vidora. If the demon's grave was one of his mistakes, he would fix it. You reset the entire universe for love, but there are many kinds of love, Michael. Michael recalled the woman's words. He felt there might be another reason other than Gaia for him to reset the universe. He wondered what the hell happened 5,000 years ago. As he was flying toward the realm tear, he noticed the monsters moving away from him. Not a single monster dared to attack Michael. He even sensed some Immortal's monsters almost as strong as him. They all avoided Michael. Now he realized why even the Immortals dared not to visit the demon's grave. If it wasn't for the woman, he would have had to fight all these monsters. With his speed, the realm tear got closer and closer to him. When he eventually reached the realm tear, he was stunned. He expected a tear in the space for 6 feet or something. But to his shock, the realm tear seemed at least 70 feet from top to bottom. He looked small in front of it. Moreover, it radiated overwhelming energy. What the hell? Ayag finally woke up from her slumber. Her eyes went wide when she saw the realm tear. Michael felt a strange force pulling him into the tear. Are you guys ready? Michael asked Vidora. We were born ready, Agay said with excitement tingling in his spine. Finally, Michael stopped resisting the pull and let loose of his body. The realm tear pulled Michael inside as he disappeared into the tear in a blink of an eye. Everything became blank to Michael. He closed his eyes because of the glow. Feeling the pull, Michael remained with his eyes closed. Vidora snuck back into Michael's armor and clenched the robes tightly. They traveled within the tear for an unknown amount of time. Eventually, Michael sensed the brightness dimming down. Suddenly, he felt a powerful pull. Before he could open his eyes and react in time, he fell into a soft grass field with a thud. Michael slowly opened his eyes to see a murky swamp before him. Everywhere he turned, he saw nothing but ancient cypress trees looming out of the murky water. Their brittle bark was weathered and pitted, scored by the marks of nature and man alike. They seemed to have stood the test of time and won. Any oblivious man wouldn't dare venture this deep into the demon's grave anymore. Only the very foolish or the very brave. Or someone with godly powers. Here and there clumps of moss clung desperately, filling the moist air with the scent of decay. The grayish mist covering the swamp added an extra creepiness to the place. Michael picked himself up. His black armor turned brown by the mud. He ascended to the air, but gravity pulled him down back to the swamp. The ground felt semi-solid and gooey. He moved 1 inch, and his feet went 2 inches deeper into the mud. Flying was the quickest route out of the swamp. However, when he tried to ascend toward the sky, a powerful force pulled him down. System, Can you do something about gravity? Michael turned to the system for its help. No can do. The system level is too low to change the rules of the demon's grave, said the system, making Michael roll his eyes. So you are useless? Michael sighed. The system did not give Michael an answer as he slowly tried to move forward through the swamp. The smelly water was up to his waist. He couldn't help feeling some weird things brushing past his legs underwater. Hope they are fish, Michael mumbled. His environmental scanning map went haywire for some reason. As a result, he was unable to sense the creatures around him. Just a few minutes into the demon's grave, he was already in a bind. But the swamp was far from something that could stop Michael. He looked at Vidora, who sat atop his shoulder. Try to fly ahead, said Michael. He wanted to know whether gravity affected only him or also Vidora. Vidora murmured before flapping their tiny wings. They hovered in the air and remained in the air without being pulled by gravity. So it only affects me, Michael mumbled. Fly ahead and keep me posted, said Michael. But don't fly too far from me, Vadra nodded and flew away. In Michael's head, keeping Vidora close to him would only prevent them from growing up. They needed to face some challenges and life-or-death situations. After all, Michael and Gaia wouldn't be with them all the time. Only by facing dire situations could they really unlock their potential. Simply put, Michael decided to force them to find their powers. Vidora nodded as they flew ahead to scout the area. Even Michael's X-ray vision seemed blurry because of the strange mist around the swamp. Slowly, he dragged himself through the mud. The swamp water smelled like rotten eggs and spoiled meat. Any other man would have thrown up. But thanks to Michael's tolerance for stink, he controlled himself. Fortunately, Michael faced no monsters or creatures while he was in the swamp. Vidora flew back and forth to keep Michael updated about the swamp. As Michael was moving through the swamp, he finally noticed what seemed to be the shore. He smiled. Finally, but his moment of joy was short-lived as he felt something grabbing his legs. Vidora returned to inform Michael about the land. To their shock, Michael disappeared into the swamp water in a blink of an eye. It happened so fast. Holy shit, ghost, something pulled him inside. The three heads looked shocked and worried at the same time. They shouted for Michael, yet they only saw bubbles and ripples on the swamp water's surface. Inside the swamp, Michael struggled to free himself from the strange thing's grab. He couldn't see what was before him with his naked eyes. So Michael immediately activated his X-ray eyes. As soon as everything turned blue, he saw a dark figure holding his legs. When he turned his vision to normal, he vaguely saw a brownish skeleton. However, it wasn't a human skeleton. On the contrary, it looked humanoid creature with two horns protruding from its skull. He also noticed a few bones that formed a vague shape of wings. The skeleton reminded Michael of Azazel. Wings, horns, and a bulky structure resembled Azazel's physical body. One of the skeletons grabbed Michael's legs, and the other grabbed his shoulder. They tried to drown him. Although drowning wouldn't kill him, Michael wasn't prepared to test his immortality underwater. According to the system, getting killed by other means wouldn't end his life but reset his cultivation. Beheading, on the other hand, would reset his cultivation and make his soul wander until he finds a suitable vessel for the soul. Finding a vessel might take days, months, years, or even decades. Under the water, Michael did not panic. He quickly formed a wind bubble around his head to breathe. The very next moment, the water began to boil because of the dark flames dancing on his hand. The cold water became hot in a few seconds. Michael clenched the skeleton's head with his hand as several cracks formed in the skeleton. In a blink of an eye, the skeleton's head turned into a white powder that dissolved in the water. After taking down the skeleton that was holding his shoulder, Michael turned his focus onto the one grabbing his leg. The dark beams shot out of his hands, creating a sizzling sound. They penetrated the skeleton as it exploded into bits and pieces. Surprisingly, Michael didn't receive any badass points or experience points for taking down the skeletons. System, did you forget something? Michael talked to the system in mind. They are already dead and weak as hell. Why do you expect experience points and badass points for killing such pathetic monsters? The system growled. They didn't feel weak, Michael replied. Mere weak monsters couldn't have pulled him down and held him underwater for a minute. Unlike the system said, they were the farthest thing from being weak. That's because of their innate strength. What did you expect from the monsters in the demon's grave? The system questioned him. Instead of arguing with the system, Michael wanted to escape the swamp water. He hated being watery and stinky. 2 streams of dark fire shot out of Michael's hands and propelled him out of the water like a rocket. From outside, Vidora noticed the water being vaporized by something hot. The temperature in the air had risen significantly. It was enough for them to know what was about to happen. As they expected, Michael shot out of the water and dashed toward the shore before the gravity could pull him down. Chapter 799 Skyhall Angels in Demon's Grave. Michael quickly dashed toward the shore and landed comfortably on solid land. Even after landing, he vaguely saw the skeletons lurking deep within the swamp. These demon skeletons would wait for another one to drown. Their next victim might arrive next month or year, but they would wait because they had all the time in the world. An equally creepy forest surrounded the murky swamp. Dark and misty forest. The only way forward was through the forest. Unfortunately, gravity was still too strong for him to fly. Should we go into the forest? Asked Sarba, but Michael shook his head. Stay with me, said Michael. Once they had entered the forest, there was a high possibility for them to get lost. Even worse, they could get into trouble with another monster. Until he could cross the forest, he wanted Vidora to be with him. Vidora nodded before landing back on his shoulder. A bone-chilling breeze brushed past him. It was like something calling for him into the forest. Michael ignored these strange feelings. The trees in the forest were malady brown. Grains of poison begrimed the bark and gleamed like witch dust. The decaying air and stifling atmosphere provided the perfect abode for those who worshipped the darkness rather than the light. In the dense shadows, spiders clutched their snare strings. Their webs shimmered like meshed steel dipped in silver. Eyes aflame with hunger, they hoped to dine on weak prey and slurp on hot blood. The deeper Michael went into the forest, the darker it became. Everything in the forest seemed primordial. If this demon's grave was indeed his mistake, as the woman said, this place must be at least 5,000 years old. It was the only explanation for the primordial trees. Their sprawling limbs guarded the darkness, blotting out any sunlight. Their bark was mottled and splotched as if the bubbled soup had been frozen in time on its surface. A pungent tang oozed from every sentient being in the forest. Bewailing sounds ghosted through the trees. Whether it was from the predator or prey, only the forest could tell. It was truly a place to make one's veins freeze over. Everything considered edible in another forest was nauseating here. It left Vidora with the same sickening taste of their own blood. It was a forest to be avoided. Michael navigated through the labyrinth of a forest, trying to find a way out. His black armor turned murky and green because of the moths and mud in the swamp. He ignored the blood-sucking leeches littering the ground and hoped they weren't on him. As he was walking through the forest, he suddenly heard a muffled thud noise. It sounded contrary to all creepy nature sounds. Michael quickly raised his hand as the Mark III grappling hook shot out of his wrist and coiled around the branch above him. Since gravity was too strong, Vidora grabbed Michael by his collar and added an extra boost to the grappling hook. Finally, he reached the top. Thanks to the trees being so cluttered, Michael was able to walk on one branch to reach the other. He crouched and strolled without making a sound. Despite being immortal, Michael did not act so brashly. There would always be someone stronger than him until he reached the absolute top. The thudding sound continued to echo through the forest rhythmically. He followed the sound that sounded louder and louder. Eventually, the forest opened up to a circular area void of any trees. The surrounding trees were neatly pruned to prevent someone from looking at the place from above. The thick canopy covered the place, only letting a few rays of light through. To Michael's shock, he saw a portal gate and several people armed to the teeth, digging the ground with some kind of contraption. It looked like a giant spoon that created a thud sound everything it dug into the ground. These men were adorned in light blue armor with angel-like wings made of sharp blades. Michael couldn't see their faces through their masks. With the golden spear in their arms and the wings, they somehow reminded Michael of angels. What surprised him more was he had seen them before. They looked exactly like the one who invaded the Nether Realm. Dalar had to stop bringing undead from the Nether Realm with the portal open because of these people. They are the same men who harvested the undead in the Nether Realm, Cain whispered to Michael while Sarba and Iag remained completely silent. They didn't dare to make a sound that might draw the attention of these armored soldiers. The angels of the Sky Hall, that's who they were. Unfortunately, Michael did not know. He had a closer relationship with them than he actually knew. Diana, his mother, was one of them. In fact, she led a powerful group of angels. Look, Sarba whispered as Michael noticed the angels digging a black casket from the ground. The contraption dug the ground deep enough to reveal what seemed to be a burial site. One by one, the angels dragged the caskets out and threw them into the portal behind them. At that moment, Michael counted 11 angels. Surprisingly, they were all at the fusion stage. This piqued Michael's curiosity. A run-of-the-mill organization wouldn't use fusion stage cultivators for grunt work. Since there was no insignia or anything that could be used to reveal their organization, Michael had to move closer. He took out a spider from the system storage and let it crawl toward the angels. I hate this place. It gives me chills. For me, it's the smell. The place smells like dead. Michael began to hear the angels as the spider crawled closer to them. I am glad this is the last grave site, Michael frowned. If this was the last grave site, it certainly meant these people were digging up more sites. Whatever was inside the caskets, these people might have hundreds or even thousands of them. No matter what, he wanted to take a look inside the casket. However, alerting these soldiers didn't sit well with Michael. His instincts told him not to kill them, although he could slaughter them quite easily. But easy didn't mean he should do it. Silence. Why do I feel like we are being watched? Suddenly, an angel turned around in Michael's direction. Michael quickly moved behind the bark to hide. The angels slowly walked toward Michael. Their instincts and perception really surprised Michael. He kept a safe distance from them, yet they somehow managed to sense him. Even though he didn't want to fight them, he would have no choice but to fight if they found him. Michael prepared himself for a battle when an angel raised his voice. Hey, we are ordered to return. The angels who were on their way to the tree Michael was on halted their steps. He is asking for us. The voice had a tinge of fear and panic. Luckily for Michael, whoever called them was far more terrifying to make them wait than to find him. Finally, the angels turned back and returned to the portal. At first, one of the angels flicked their wrists as the giant spoon-like digging machine flew straight into the portal. Then, they tossed the caskets behind the machine. Afterward, the angels themselves flew into the portal, disappearing from the forest. By the time Michael decided to move his body, the place was empty. The angels didn't bother to close the hole they dug, which worked in Michael's favor. He leaped from branch to branch and eventually landed on the palace where the portal was a few moments ago. The hole was picked clean. As far as Michael could see, there were no caskets left behind. He looked around the place for a few moments to see if they had left behind something that could be used to unveil their identities. Unfortunately, Michael's search bore no fruit. After a brief moment of looking around, Michael returned to the front of the hole they had dug. This hole was at least 8 feet wide and 15 feet deep. You can't jump down there, said Iag. She was right. Gravity was too strong for Michael to fly upward again. It was weird and strange, but he could do nothing about it. Hence, he decided to drop one of his drones back into the hole. The drone slowly hovered down into the dark hole. They patiently waited outside to get a glimpse of anything but mud. A few minutes later, when Michael was about to conclude that the angels had grabbed all the caskets, Michael noticed the edge of a casket sticking out of the mud. Found something, Michael said to Vidora. A casket? Asked Iag as Michael nodded. Since you can't jump down and carry it on your back, let us go down there, Sarba suggested. Having no other choice, Michael agreed. After he nodded, Vidora leaped into the hole from his shoulder. They dived down until they reached the drone. Despite their small physical stature, they were blessed with enough raw power to carry the casket in their legs. But first, they had to dig out the casket. "Little help here," Ayag shouted. Their claws weren't sharp enough to dig, so Michael shot dark beams out of his eyes to dig out the casket. Vidora flew aside, avoiding the dark beams. The mud turned to ashes around the casket. "Careful. Don't hit the casket," said Sarba. Soon, the casket began to shake. Vidora tightly held the casket by its edge and pulled it out of the mud. "It's heavy," Ayag cussed. The casket was surprisingly heavier than she initially expected. She wondered what the heck was inside. Eventually, Vidora brought the casket back and dropped it with a loud thud. The casket cracked in several places. It was apparent the casket was ancient. But still, Michael was able to see several runes engraved in the casket. He inspected the casket thoroughly. When he activated his X-ray vision, he saw a silhouette of a humanoid being inside. Michael was about to open the casket when he heard twigs and dried leaves breaking behind him. Someone was behind him. Instead of panicking, Michael slowly turned around. Chapter 800 Prank gone wrong. While Michael was in the demon's grave, Sabrina was returning home from Azair. Tired and exhausted by flying all the way to Penn Town. The once salmon and lavender sky transformed into a vast expanse of jet black. The night laid down a blanket of darkness. When Sabrina tilted her head skyward, she could clearly see millions of bright stars dotted on the black sky at night as the thick gloomy clouds shaded over the luminous moon covering its entirety. Penn Town glimmered like a Christmas tree on the horizon. Despite the time, the streets were bustling with crowds and carriages. The baby shower of Princess Catherine and Prince Andrews was a hot topic in the continent. Almost every prominent figure in the world was invited to the event. Usually, coming across a fusion stage warrior was as rare as a four-leaf clover. But that was proven wrong in Penn Town. These fusion stage cultivators arrived at the Penn Town a month early to ensure security. In addition to powerful cultivators, several invisible arrays and runes covered the entire town. These specialized arrays were able to read one's thoughts and alert security if they bore any ill intentions. Only the Empress of Ara had these arrays. But thanks to Rowena, the Winstons could get them. As Sabrina flew toward the manor, she felt a warmth in her body. She didn't freak out as she knew the arrays were scanning her. In the distance, the Winston Manor stood majestically glimmering. The servants went all out in decorations. They almost turned the manor unrecognizable. Rare and beautiful flowers waved their heads, welcoming the gates. Special orbs fired light beams, turning the fountain water a colorful rainbow. The servants of Winston Manor noticed Sabrina in the air and quickly bowed. Their eyes glistened with joy because of their young Miss return. "Young Miss Sabrina is back. Inform Lady Diana and Lady Imelda." The servants cheered as Sabrina flew straight into the manor through the roof door. "Missy." As soon as Sabrina landed on the rooftop, she heard a wobbly voice. Surprisingly, she saw Samuel standing before her with his usually neatly combed hair messed up. He looked funny with his nervous smile. Judging by the smell of rum coming from him, Sabrina could guess what made Samuel walk clumsily and smile like a guilty child. Well, Sabrina mused. "Are you drunk, Grandpa Samuel?" The answer was obvious to Sabrina. Still, she wanted to mess with Samuel. "No." Samuel quickly hid the mug of rum behind his back. Since the baby shower was just a week away, everyone in the Winston family enjoyed themselves. But it was surprising to see the stoic Samuel himself get drunk. "What's that behind you?" Sabrina asked, trying to hold the urge to laugh at Samuel. "Young Mississippi." "You must be tired." Samuel slowly talked. He found it difficult to stay still and find words. "Samuel, where the hell are you?" Suddenly, Sabrina heard Imelda shout from downstairs. "Bring me another barrel." Sabrina couldn't believe what she had just heard. It was Imelda, there was no doubt in Sabrina's mind. Now everything made sense to Sabrina. The room behind Samuel was used to store booze for special occasions. It looked like Samuel came here to bring booze to Imelda. A light bulb lit up in Sabrina's mind. She slowly walked toward Samuel. "Why don't you take a short nap, Grandpa Samuel?" Sabrina whispered in a gentle tone as specks of golden light floated into Samuel's mind. Soon, the old man dropped to the ground and began snoring. After putting Samuel to sleep, Sabrina opened the door behind Samuel. The door opened with a creak, revealing countless wooden barrels. The Winstons only opened these barrels for special occasions. Each barrel was at least 100 years old and engraved with a special rune. The air in the room itself had a tinge of sweetness. Sabrina walked toward a barrel and placed her hand on the side as a rune glimmered on the barrel. In a blink of an eye, the barrel shrank to the size of a mug. Sabrina picked up the mug and left the room. She headed to Imelda's room with an amused smile. The manor was just as cheerful inside as it was on the outside. Every corner of the house was decorated with rare flowers, antiques, and light orbs. Moreover, everyone was in such a good mood. Luckily for Sabrina, no one noticed her as they were all in the main hall, and Imelda's room was far from it. After taking a few quick steps, Sabrina reached an emerald green door with Winston family portrait hanging above. Sabrina couldn't help smiling, looking at the portrait. She was 5 years old when they drew the portrait. Everyone looked so happy in the picture. To be honest, Sabrina missed those good old days. Nowadays, everyone in her family was going through a tough time. Letting out a heavy sigh, Sabrina opened the room. As soon as the door creaked open, Sabrina was welcomed with the strong scent of booze in the air. She saw Imelda rolling on the bed with a large mug of rum in her hand. Her hair was a mess, and so were her robes. A wide, stupid grin from ear to ear was plastered on her face. Diana. Imelda mistook Sabrina for Diana. One couldn't blame Imelda completely. The older Sabrina got, the more she resembled her mother. Since Imelda was drunk to the throat, she thought it was Diana who entered the room. The prankster in Sabrina told her to go along with Imelda and pretend to be her mother. "I brought you something, Imelda," Sabrina sternly said. She surprisingly sounded exactly like Diana. Hence, Imelda had no clue that it was Sabrina who was in front of her. "Sit down." Imelda pulled Sabrina down, forcing her to sit down on the bed beside her. Imelda threw her hand around Sabrina's neck and took a large gulp of rum. "I am so happy, Dian. After a long time I truly feel free." "Why is that?" asked Sabrina. She liked where it was going and decided to pretend to be Diana longer than she initially thought. "What do you mean, why? Our whole family is coming together. When was the last time this happened?" said Imelda. Sabrina was about to ask something else when Imelda shocked Sabrina. "Accept him, thanks to the gods, I pray." Sabrina creased her brows as Imelda emptied the mug in her hand. "I know I shouldn't say this, but he is a curse, Diana." Sabrina was utterly confused. The words that came from Imelda's mouth didn't make any sense to her. "I even have to call you Diana because of him." Sabrina's instinct told her to refill Imelda's mug. With a flick of her wrist, she transformed the mug to its original size. Sabrina drowned a mug into the barrel and handed it over to Imelda. "You can call me whatever you want, Imelda," said Sabrina. At that moment, Sabrina didn't know she was about to be shaken to the core. "Good." Imelda raised her mug before gulping the rum down her throat. Foam and rum flowed out her mouth and drenched her robes. "Harriet Hunt," said Imelda. For a moment, Sabrina couldn't believe what she had just heard. Harriet Hunt was a legend among cultivators. As a student of Trident Academy, Sabrina studied Harriet Hunt and her adventures. It wouldn't be an overstatement to say Harriet Hunt was the most powerful and strongest cultivator of her time. It was really unfortunate that she and her sisters died in an accident. Even to this day, some people believed Harriet Hunt is still alive. Sabrina was one of them. "Why did you call me that?" Sabrina frowned. "It's your name, silly." Imelda knocked Sabrina on the head. After hearing Imelda's words, Sabrina's mind went blank. Confused and bewildered, Sabrina stared at Imelda. Ever since Sabrina was little, she had this strange feeling that her mother was putting on a mask. After she grew up, it felt like Diana was pretending to be someone else. Although Sabrina had grown used to the feeling, Imelda's words brought up everything Sabrina buried deep within her. "I am Harriet Hunt, and who are you?" "Irena Hunt." Once again, Imelda raised her mug proudly, having no idea what she had just done. Silence fell over the room. It took Sabrina a few minutes to collect her thoughts. At that moment, her thoughts were a mess. What she thought would be a good prank turned out to be a life-changing moment. Never in a million years had Sabrina thought her mother was Harriet Hunt. Sabrina stood from the bed and went to the doorway to close the door. Sabrina decided to unveil the secret behind her mother and why she faked her death. "Don't you miss our old life?" asked Sabrina. Imelda shook her head. "I have everything I want here," said Imelda. "I am glad you feel that way, Imelda. I just wish I could say the same," Sabrina sighed. "You have to let him go, Harry. He is a curse. The moment he came into existence, we lost all the happiness in our lives." Sabrina wondered who she was calling a curse. Judging by her words and the look in Imelda's eyes, Sabrina had this strange, eerie feeling. But Sabrina was afraid of asking her directly, which might reveal her identity to Imelda. Instead, Sabrina decided to take a subtle approach. She put herself in Diana's shoes and thought about what her mother would say at this moment. "He is not a curse, Imelda. Aren't we happy right now?" "I am, but you aren't," said Imelda. "You can fool others, Harry, but not me. I know you. My heart bleeds every time you go out there to keep him safe. Yet you forgot he is the threat to all, not the other way around." "You don't mean these words, Imelda," said Sabrina. "I do, Harry. It's you who has yet to see who he really is. You know what he did to the Barnes." As soon as Sabrina heard these words, she learned who she was talking about. "Ghost," Sabrina mumbled under her breath. "Don't even say his name, Harry. It's bad luck. Also, don't do anything stupid like trying to invite him, Harry. He brings nothing but death and destruction." "Why would I do that?" asked Sabrina. Imelda dragged her words. "Because you still think of him as your son. Remember this, Harry, you may have given birth to twins, but you only have one son. It's Noah." Sabrina's heart skipped a beat. Her entire body trembled from head to toe. Sweat beads appeared on her forehead as she shivered. "Ghost is my brother." Sabrina's words spanned before her eyes, learning the biggest secret in her life. Chapter 801 Andor, God of Time and Space. Tears gushed out of Sabrina's eyes, knowing the truth. The Dark Lord was her brother. Everything fell into pieces in her mind. When she prayed for her brother to save her from the vampires, he arrived at her aid. Now she knew why she felt a strange connection with Ghost. The truth would change the Winston Manor forever. The images of Ghost's face flashed across Sabrina's eyes. She wanted to tell Rowena and Noah about the truth. If Noah and Ghost had learned the truth as she did, they might stop hurting each other. Sabrina now had the power to bring peace between the Guardians and the Dark Lord. But first, she wanted to know why her mother hid the truth about Ghost from everyone. "Imelda," Sabrina called Imelda. It became so difficult to keep pretending as Diana when her mind was in a shamble. Sabrina turned her gaze back to Imelda. Suddenly, the door creaked. It slowly opened, revealing Samuel. The spell she cast on Samuel should keep him asleep for at least 6 hours. Yet Samuel somehow managed to wake up and reach the room. Moreover, Sabrina wondered what he was doing here. "Grandp," Sabrina's words stuck in her throat when she noticed the strange glow in Samuel's eyes. The pair of eyes glimmered like diamonds. It wasn't the same man Sabrina had seen upstairs. He walked with a certain grace. At that moment, he radiated a kingly aura as he walked toward them. "Samuel," Imelda raised her mud, wordlessly asking for a refill from the butler. However, Sabrina didn't think the man before them was their butler. He seemed different. But before Sabrina could question the man, an energy pulse shot out of Samuel's eyes and knocked out Sabrina and Imelda cold. The two ladies were lying flat on the bed. With a flick of his wrist, Samuel closed the door. Without wasting any time, Samuel moved their unconscious body to the floor and put them next to each other. He then squatted beside them. Silence fell over the room. The cheerful laughter and songs sung by the servants barely reached the closed room. "The drunk always spills the beans," Samuel sighed. As Sabrina sensed, it wasn't Samuel in the room. On the contrary, Samuel was possessed by Andreas' sliver of soul. The last time he took over Samuel's body, Andreas wiped off the memories of Ethan, Imelda, and Sabrina. This wasn't the first time Sabrina had learned the truth about Diana's real identity and her connection to Ghost. Previously, Ethan told Sabrina about Diana's real identity when she returned from the Shadow Realm. If it wasn't for him, Sabrina would have told her entire family about Ghost and his connection to the Winston family. Andreas couldn't let that happen because he cared about Noah and his family more than anything. Revealing the truth about Ghost being Noah's brother would bring nothing but destruction upon the Winston family. Only the death of the Dark Lord could ensure the Winston family's safety from the Sky Hall. But killing him was not an easy task. Only Noah could take the Dark Lord's life. A mere moment of hesitation to kill the Dark Lord would bring calamity upon the world. If the Dark Lord managed to kill Noah, there would be no one to stop him. At that time, the world would turn into the Dark Realm, which Lady Qingjiu desperately wanted the Great Eight Clans and the Sky Hall to stop. All of her sacrifices and struggles would be meaningless if Noah failed to fulfill his destiny. The fate of the entire world was resting upon Noah's shoulders. Hence, the last thing Andreas wanted was Sabrina to change his mind about taking the Dark Lord's life. Andreas gently placed one hand on Sabrina's forehead while the other on Imelda's. His hands glowed, radiating a gentle white light from within. The light enabled Andreas to access both of their memories of the last hour. Every time Andreas used the spell, it cost him a bit of his soul. But it had to be done. Andreas didn't think the Dark Lord would spare the Winstons if he knew the truth. Knowing Noah, Andreas was sure Noah would drop his guard against the Dark Lord in case he learned that the Dark Lord was his twin brother. Expelliarmus, mumbled Andreas, wiping off Sabrina and Imelda's memories of the last hour. Gradually, the light in Samuel's hands dimmed out. Then he left the room as if nothing had happened, leaving Sabrina and Imelda behind. They would have zero memories of what had happened once they woke up. Knowing the secret of the Winston family was safe, Andreas could rest easy. Being stripped away of their memories, Sabrina and Imelda slept on the ground peacefully. Read chapter 587 to refresh your memories. Meanwhile, somewhere else in a pocket dimension, a lone castle stood gracefully under a starry sky. Trapped between inviting lush green hills and intimidating jet-black, snow-capped mountains lay the castle. The castle resided peacefully at the top of a hilltop, not making a sound. No one knew why it was there or who built it. But indeed, it was something quite unique. As the sparkling blue light beamed upon the golden walls of the castle, it revealed the splendor and majesty of the castle. The starry sky revealed the ceramic pavements, the golden statues, and the most beautifully engineered towers that touched the clouds. If one were to look at it from a neighboring hill station, the castle size itself could be convincing enough of that of a city. Covering hundreds of hectares of verdant land. The view was simply breathtaking. Cyan blue lakes fainting the thousands of trees lined up against one another, tainting the land with various shades of blue, red, and whatnot. As much as the golden castle looked grandeur, it was also quite intimidating. Its hundreds of foot-high walls and glistening ruins and arrays were enough to scare the most daring of enemies away. Only one being was living inside the castle, a god. Not only in the castle but even in the entire dimension, he was the only living being. He had been in the castle for thousands of years. The inside of the castle was just as grandeur as the outside. Bulky braziers hung from each of the 12 obsidian columns. These columns lit up the lower levels of the throne hall and allowed shadows to play and dance where light could not reach. The illustrations of a golden-haired man on the rounded ceiling danced in the flickering light while sculptures resembling the man looked down upon the maple floor of this grand hall. A viridian rug ran in a circle around the hall, with 2 paths at the throne and the main entrance, while ribbon banners with adorned embroideries covered parts of the walls. Draperies edged massive, tinted glass windows colored the same viridian as the banners. The curtains had been adorned with gold leaves and embellished borders. In the middle of the throne hall, on an elevated platform, sat a radiant throne made of sapphire and gold overlooking the statues resembling the man sitting on the throne. The man had silver frizzy hair tied in a ponytail, revealing a fresh, gloomy face. Glittering hazel eyes sat narrowly within their sockets, watching wearily over the empty throne hall. Freckles were spread charmingly around his nose and cheekbones. A sword left a mark reaching from just under the right eyebrow, first running towards his small lips and ending above his right eye. This scar kept him awake for thousands of years. While the man was resting on the throne, a cloud of dark smoke rose from the ground before him. He stood up from the throne and climbed down the stairs to reach the ground. Andor. The cloud of smoke talked in a terrifying otherworldly voice. "How long do you have to wait for him?" The cloud of darkness asked Andor. "He has started to build his stupid castle. Compared to the last time, he is progressing much faster than I initially anticipated," said Andor. For some reason, his eyes glimmered with killing intent, and his voice oozed hatred. Just thinking about him made Andor's blood boil. "Do you feel the same hatred and anger toward him as you did 5,000 years ago, Andor?" The dark cloud asked Andor. "No," Andor shook his head. "What I felt 5,000 years ago was just a seed. It has grown into a giant tree of hatred in my heart. I want his blood more than I want a way out of this pathetic mortal realm. Patience is a virtue, Andor. As the god of space and time, you should know this more than anyone," said the dark cloud. "I have all the time in the world." "He made sure of that," Andor snarled. "That was his mistake. Now, you know everything he would do before he does." A devilish grin emerged on Andor's face. "He forgot who controls the time. Soon, he would pay the price for it," Andor chuckled devilishly. Every fiber in his goldy body was filled with hatred toward his fellow god, the god of darkness. How could Michael have reset the time without meddling with the god of time and space? Their battle shook the universe itself and created tears in reality. The god of darkness proved to be the most powerful of the two. As a result, he successfully reset the time using Andor's blood. Because Andor was the god of time and space, he was able to escape the time array created by the god of darkness. By resetting the time, Michael closed the portal to the higher realm, the world of the gods. The portal could only be opened again by the one who closed it in the first place. But to do that, Andor had to wait for the god of darkness to get stronger. Certain things must happen to the god of darkness in his life. Otherwise, the timeline would change, and his way out of the mortal realm might become a dream. That was the main reason why the Sky Hall didn't send their entire army to destroy Michael in the first place. Because the Sky Hall was controlled by none other than Andor himself. Chapter 802 The Realm of Gods. Eventually, the cloud of darkness faded out of existence, leaving Andor alone in the giant castle. It was time for Andor to see what his minions were up to. He just raised his hand as a golden beam of light shot out of his hands. Soon, 3 figures emerged from the light. They were in their astral forms rather than physical forms. The moment they came into existence, they fell to their knees. "Heavenly Lord Andor," they greeted him with utmost respect and reverence. They didn't even raise their heads to look him in the eyes. These 3 were none other than the 3 elders who planned to enslave Noah, Devdan, Thorfinn, and the lady in white, Erail. Through these 3, Andor controlled the entire Sky Hall. They served him wholeheartedly in the hope of becoming gods one day. Once the Dark Lord could open the portal to higher realms, they planned to ascend with Andor. "What are you 3 idiots doing nowadays?" asked Andor. He didn't bother to hide his disgust toward the mortals. The mortals were pretty disgusting in his eyes. In his mind, the mortals were a disease to the world. If he cared about the world, even for a bit, he would have cleansed the world of the mortals. Unfortunately, not all the gods shared the same thought about the mortals. In the higher realm, some gods loved the mortals, some hated them, and the majority of them couldn't care less about the mortals. Thanks to the Dark Lord, no god could descend from the higher realm to the mortal realm, and Andor was stuck in the mortal realm for thousands of years. Guiding Noah Winston in his path to be stronger, "Heavenly Lord," Devdan answered Andor despite how he was getting treated by Andor. "What's the god of light up to?" asked Andor. As the god who wields power to kill his opposite, Andor rooted for Noah. Simply put, Noah was like a friend to Andor as the enemy of his enemy was his friend. "He is on his way to his home, Heavenly Lord," said the dwarf, Thorfinn. What? Andor's calm voice turned menacing. He creased his sword-like brows. Shouldn't he be searching for the arrows? Asked Andor. Although killing a god was not an easy task, it was not impossible. There were some ancient texts in the higher realm which mentioned killing a god and its effects. But Andor had no idea how a mortal like Xianxia managed to get a piece of this ancient text and managed to forge these god-killing arrows. Even in the higher realm, Andor had never seen a god die for eons. Only some scripts mentioned some rogue gods and the war between the gods. As for the consequences of a god's death, nothing was mentioned in any texts. If only Andor was at his peak power, he would have found Xianxia with a snap of his fingers. After all, he was the god of time and space. Unfortunately, he was still recovering from the last battle with the Dark Lord. He was fortunate the Dark Queen was there to save him from the Dark Lord. This Dark Queen is not Gaia. The trio stayed silent. Their bodies trembled, sensing the overwhelming power radiating from Andor. Although he was not at his peak power, he could still kill the trio before they could blink an eye. But he needed them more than he liked to admit. As the god of time and space, Andor knew better than anyone of the consequences of altering the events in the timeline. Any simple change could result in a catastrophic change in the future. Hence, Andor had to approach the situation with extreme caution. For a moment, Andor picked his brain in complete silence. Finally, Andor came up with an idea to nudge Noah in the right direction. It was not changing the events per se, but speeding things up a bit. Send an assassin to the Winston Manor. Take a shot at one of Noah's loved ones, but do not kill them. Just let your clone in the family take care of the assassin, said Andor. Let the Dark Lord take the fall. It should be enough to light the flame in Noah's heart. By injuring someone from Noah's family, Andor was not completely altering the timeline but nudging Noah in the right direction. In this situation, the right direction would let Noah battle the Dark Lord. Andor wanted the god of darkness to die, but to ascend to the higher realm, he just needed one god to die. It might even be Noah. But no matter what, their battle must happen. Andor was manipulating the Sky Hall and the Great Eight clans from behind the scene to ensure that. Otherwise, the Sky Hall could have easily taken down the moment Michael revealed himself as the Dark Lord. Although Andor felt he was in control, and he was, for the most part, he failed to take the past Dark Lord into the equation. His ego as a god blinded him from thinking whether the past Dark Lord planned this or not. Andor was still thinking that the past Dark Lord did not anticipate Andor would escape from the time array. As for the god of darkness, make his life harder, but don't end it. I won't stay in this scum of a world a second longer than I have to, Andor snarled. It wouldn't take a second for Andor to leave his caste and kill the god of darkness. The current Dark Lord's power was not even a fraction of his past self. Hence, killing him would be as easy as stepping on an ant to Andor. However, if he did that, the Dark Lord's soul would leave his body and wander the universe for an unknown time before finding another suitable vessel. It might take eons. Even the god of time and space did not have that much patience. The quickest way for Andor to leave this mortal realm was with the god of darkness. Consider it done, Heavenly Lord. The trio bobbed their heads up and down. Now leave. Andor waved his hand as the astral figures of the trio vanished into thin air. As Andor returned to his throne, his mind played tricks with him. He heard the god of darkness words in his mind. May the other gods have mercy on you because I want. These words sounded loud and clear in Andor's head. It was as though the Dark Lord himself was speaking to him from somewhere in the castle. Andor clenched his fist to the point golden blood trickled out of his palm. I am not my brother, Andor. He will show you mercy. I will show you death. When mortals are desperate and helpless, they will pray to a god. Tell me, Andor, what are you going to do? The more he heard the Dark Lord's words, the redder Andor's eyes turned. He wanted to leave the castle and rip him to pieces. I am the god of darkness. I am vengeance. I am your death. Andor's heart skipped a beat when his mind played the last words the Dark Lord spoke to him. This wasn't new to Andor. On the contrary, he had been hearing the Dark Lord's words and seeing his images flash in front of his eyes for thousands of years. Still, every time it happened, It had the same effect on Andor. "We will meet again, my dear god of darkness," Andor growled as his eyes glistened. Meanwhile, back on the demon's grave, Michael slowly turned around. To his surprise, it was one of the men who went into the portal a few moments ago. The angel was holding a crossbow made of some kind of red stone. The crossbow bolt glistened, threatening to end the life of whoever it was pointed at. "Easy there, tiger," said Michael. "Do you see this?" The angel was not afraid of Michael, not even a bit. The way he talked showed his courage. "This is specially designed to knock out an immortal," said the angel. Because of the helmet on his head, Michael couldn't see the angel's eyes. But if he had to guess, he would say they had no fear within them. "Get on your knees with your hands in the air," said the angel, only to see Michael laugh. Vidora snuck back into Michael's robes. "Trust me, that bolt wouldn't save you if I wanted to kill you," said Michael while moving the spider toward the angel. It was slowly crawling on his armor. The angel had no idea. Michael was just buying time until the spider could reach an exposed area in his armor and send its venom into the angel's bloodstream. Spider was just one way of dealing with the angel. If Michael wanted, he could kill him with his dead beams in a blink of an eye. The angel was not even strong as he was just at the fusion stage. "You have 3 seconds, the angel warned Michael. "But you only have 2 seconds, said Michael as the angel's eyes went wide. His muscles tensed. Soon, the angel collapsed to the ground, unconscious. "Done," Michael smiled. He walked toward the angel and picked up the crossbow from the ground. "They'll take a look at you later," said Michael. The crossbow vanished into thin air as Michael turned his gaze back to the angel on the ground. "Let's get out of here first," said Kane. Lingering around in this place was not a safe option, Michael knew that. He waved his hand as the casket slid toward him. Michael growled, picking up the casket from the ground. He carried the casket on one shoulder and lifted the angel by his chest plate. Then, Michael dashed into the forest, using the lightning dash. Michael just hoped the other angels wouldn't track him down until he could get information from the angel. Flying away would have been much easier if it wasn't for the strange and powerful gravity. Eventually, Michael put several miles of distance between the digging site and him. From where he was standing, he saw nothing but ancient trees. The place was enveloped in complete darkness. After putting down the casket and the angel down, Michael stretched his arms. "What are you hiding inside?" Michael asked, looking at the casket on the ground. He didn't waste any more time. Instead, he grabbed the casket on its edge and pried it open with brute strength. "What the fuck?" Michael was stunned by the thing inside. Chapter 803, Return of an Old Enemy. When Michael opened the casket, he saw a demon skeleton lying on a black cloth. Suddenly, something lit up within the demon's empty eye sockets. It lunged at Michael at lightning speed. Thanks to his cat-like reflex, he raised his hand, bringing out the black shield to block the demon's fist. The demon's hand cracked upon hitting the black shield. Without giving any time for the demon to retaliate, Michael grabbed the demon by its neck and forced it down instead of attacking it. He then quickly shut the casket on the demon. The demon banged and growled from within. Several seconds passed as Michael noticed some runes started to radiate a pale blue light in the casket. Following the runes, the demon inside calmed down. It finally stopped banging against the casket and returned to its eternal slumber. "So all those caskets have demons inside?" asked Iag from within Michael's robes. Michael did not answer. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the unconscious angel. A pale light shot out from Michael and scanned the angel on the ground. Just after the light faded away, Michael approached the angel. He picked him up by his neck and slammed him against a tree nearby. The force substituted the need for water to wake up the angel. Michael grabbed the angel's helmet and pulled it upwards, revealing the face of a golden-haired elf. The elf stared back at Michael with no emotions. One would expect the angel to be scared shitless, yet Michael saw no signs of fear in the angel's eyes. He doubted the angel was oblivious to the fact he was the Dark Lord. The entire world knew his face. Either the angel was really courageous, or he didn't know Michael's identity. There were other explanations. "You shouldn't be here," said the angel. If I were you, I would worry about yourself, Iag said as they leaped on top of Michael's shoulder. A three-headed hydra. Finally, Vidora brought a sliver of a surprise to the elf's expressionless face. Hey, race the deal. I'm going to ask you some questions. Satisfy me with your answers and I will let you live. Does that sound good to you? Asked Michael, only to see the elf snicker. Humph. You are going to kill me either way. It's in your eyes. But I will answer your questions. Both Michael and Vidora were surprised by the angel's answer. That makes my life much easier. Let's begin with who you are and whom you serve. It doesn't matter who I am when I serve the Almighty, said the angel. His voice oozed pride and arrogance. And who is that? Asked Michael. Skyhall. Michael clenched his fist as a sudden urge to snap the angel's neck emerged in his heart. But he controlled himself. Michael used to think the Guardians were the big bad guy in his life until he met Aladir. Only then did he realize the real puppeteer was none other than the Skyhall, the most powerful clan in the entire world. Even before he was born, they slaughtered millions and eradicated the Order of Death with the help of Andreas. Soon, my fellow angels will bring you the wrath of Holy Skyhall and smite you to oblivion, the angel threatened Michael. Vidora saw Michael bruising into laughter. Angels, wrath, smiting me to oblivion. Geez, you guys really think you're from the God's land, don't you? Michael's devilish laughter echoed through the forest. Lucky for you, angel. You are staring right at a god in the flesh, said Sarba. I know who you are the moment I laid my eyes on you, said the angel. Now Michael really felt bad about his reputation. He was the Dark Lord. Low-level soldiers like this angel should be afraid of him. Yet somehow, this angel showed no signs of fear. Of course, Michael could bring a whole new world of fear within the angel if he used the fear toxin. The world has changed, Dark Lord. You are not the highest priority of Skyhall. How do I put this nicely? You are a cog in the machine, just a big one but not the biggest. I am offended. Michael shook his head disappointedly. I thought you idiots were hunting him, the Dark Lord. Instead, you're grave robbing. What? Asked Iag, turning the angel's gaze away from Michael. An angel's duty is to get the order done, not to question it. In other words, you don't know. That's a shame, Sarba sighed. They are building an army. Why else do they need the undead and now the demons? The question is, are they planning to wage war against us or someone else? Said Cain. When Michael looked at the elf, he didn't seem to know the answer. As he said, the angel was just a soldier. Michael doubted that even if he interrogated the entire angel unit, they would know something about the harvesting of demons and the undead. Who's giving you these orders? Asked Michael. It would be better if I showed you, the angel smiled. Soon, Vidora heard the trees rustle around them. The dried leaves and twigs broke under heavy footsteps. Michael let go of the angel as a strange light fought off the darkness around them. As Michael expected, 5 angels came out of the dark woods and stepped into the light. A hovering ball of light lit the place, revealing the glistening runes in their armor. They all spread their metal angel's wings and took out their golden spears to end Michael's life. Even the angel Michael interrogated quickly dashed away and joined his fellow angels. To Msaiheel's shock, an angel stabbed the elf right through his chest with the golden spear. The elf coughed up blood as the angel lifted his body into the air. You are tainted by evil. Begone and find the pure light in the next life. The angel talked in a strange, otherworldly voice that was capable of tearing a man's eardrum. The high-pitched voice even hurt Sabra's ears. Soon, the elf's body turned into nothing but millions of specks of light. These golden lights shone in the air like fireflies. Gradually, they faded out of existence. Michael was stunned by this act of the angel. I thought the angels were merciful, said Michael. He slowly walked to the center of the light while the angels surrounded him. Despite their weak soul refining stage cultivation, they dared to raise their spears against Michael. These angels certainly have a death wish. Even the system ridiculed the angels. Michael cracked his neck. The angels thought they caught him off guard. However, Michael knew the elf had a rune engraved on him, which emitted some kind of signal to the other angels. Simply put, Michael wanted these angels to find him. Not that Michael wanted to capture these angels and interrogate, but to kill them. In his eyes, they looked like sacks of experience points. But what surprised him was how courageous these angels were. Any other soul refiner would have trembled to the core in front of an immortal. Yet these angels were fearless. 5 angels. Michael slowly looked around. The angels were poised to attack him any second. Suddenly, the orb of light hovering above the angels exploded into bits. Darkness returned to the place. The Angie's eyes glimmered like diamonds in the darkness. They all dashed to the center where Michael was standing. Ding! The sound of metal clashing reverberated through the forest. Unlike the angels were expecting, they hit nothing. Arg! An angel growled. Michael grabbed an angel by his wings and ripped them off with his bare hand. His dark beams shot out of his eyes, ending the struggling angel's life altogether. He dropped the dead angel. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a soul-refining stage level 6 angel. The reward is 300,000 experience points and 6,000 badass points. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully being a badass. The reward is 7,000 badass points. Before even the other angels could hear the sound of his body hitting the ground, lightning flashed across the dark forest. In the light that lasted for a moment, the angels saw the bloodied metal wings on the ground. Then, another angel groaned. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a soul-refining stage level 5 angel. The reward is 300,000 experience points and 6,000 badass points. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully being a badass. The reward is 8,000 badass points. In a blink of an eye, Michael ended the life of 2 angels. They weren't even a challenge to Michael. When the remaining 3 tried to cast a spell, their golden spears radiated eyes blinding golden light. However, their casting was abruptly stopped by a wave of dark flames that shot out of Michael's body. The ring of dark flames reduced the angels to ashes. Even their rune-engraved armors were melted like candles. The almighty angels were turned to a hot pile of ashes. The system continuously rang in his mind, awarding him with experience and badass points. At that moment, a person with cat face and black fur was watching Michael from far away from Michael's environmental scanning range. This cat was the same person who was tasked to protect Tanulia Valrin and the brother of Jacobi who tracked down and almost killed Gaia. He was stalking the Dark Lord for years and finally came to the demon's grave to seek revenge for his brother's death. Dark Lord, the cat clenched his fist. His black fur made him blend with the night perfectly. It took everything he learned to find that his brother Jacobi was killed by Ghost and Gaia. Even to this moment, there was no solid evidence to prove his theory. But his gut instincts told it was Ghost, and that was all he needed. No matter what, he would either kill the Dark Lord or die trying. That was certain. From afar, he saw the Dark Lord teleport the casket to somewhere else. Afterward, the Dark Lord dashed into the forest, disappearing from his sight. He leaped to another branch and started to follow the Dark Lord. Chapter 804. City of the Dwarves. The country of Dalgarum is an enormous country with a population mainly consisting of dwarves. Bordered between wasteland to the north, a canal to the south, tall mountains to the east, and a huge sea to the west, the country of Dalgarum mainly lived off blacksmithing and woodcrafting. Dalgarum itself was mainly covered in large hills and had a hot climate, which had led to a freely spread population. Despite the number of dwarves, most of them lived in small villages. The country's landscape was quite frightening: withered flower fields, bleak, bare forests, and smelly, overgrown ponds were just a sliver of the harshness Dalgarum had to offer, which was why the country was unpopular among foreigners. The dwarves of Dalgarum were unwelcoming towards foreigners, especially toward the elves, and tended to welcome them with bitterness. They felt foreigners were a disease to the kingdom. At that moment, a young lady with golden hair left a black carriage and headed deeper into the forest. A long sword dangled on her back, complementing the silver armor she was wearing. "Don't take too much time," a thick, bitter voice resonated from the carriage. Yeah, The woman rolled her eyes as she walked into the forest without giving a damn about the carriage or the person inside. Annoying little twat. What did I do to deserve such an asshole for a client? The woman bickered with herself. The passive and daunting forest around her had the appeal of a forgotten land, which had been lost in time. The isolated forest remained in a capsule, untouched by the destructive essence of man. The dark shadows of the voluminous trees and puzzled bushes had become the structure of the forest. All the giant trees in the forest stood proud and tall as protectors of the exigent grounds, as the impregnated bushes that had consumed the hard regions of the forest concealed the land from beneath the dynamic portals of the open sky. The woman needed some time away from her client to clear her mind. She was afraid that if she spent any more time in the carriage with him, she might draw her sword and cut his head off. Standing before a large tree, she looked left and right. Then she punched the tree as hard as she could. The tree trembled, shedding its leaves. Her punch formed a hole in the tree. "That's quite an anger you're holding." The woman felt a chill running down her spine when she heard a devilish voice from behind. She turned around with her sword in her hand. To her surprise, a figure dressed in complete black stood before her. The power that radiated from her body made the woman tremble. "A half-immortal," the woman mumbled. Her grip around the sword loosened. Their cultivation gap was huge as she was at the soul-refining stage, and the black figure was at the half-immortal stage. If they fought, there was no chance for her to defeat the black figure. "I am not here to hurt you," said the black figure. "On the contrary, I am here to make a deal with you. A deal you might gladly accept." As a mercenary for hire, the woman liked the sound of the word deal. Controlling the overwhelming fear in her heart, the woman managed to speak. "What kind of deal?" "Simple," the black figure shrugged. "I will give you 300,000 gold coins for you to leave and never turn back." The woman's eyes glistened with joy, but soon, the glimmer faded out. She couldn't believe someone would pay 300,000 for no reason. But then the black figure tossed a space ring toward her. The woman instinctively caught the ring. "Check it out," said the black figure. When the woman sent a sliver of arch energy into the space ring, her eyes widened. She saw stacks of gold coins within the space ring. If she had to guess, she would say the stack contains 300,000 gold coins. "I am not very patient. So take the ring and leave, or I will take your life. The choice is yours." The woman's heart skipped a beat when she heard these words. "I will take the ring," the woman quickly said without taking any time. "But close the deal with a handshake." The black figure slowly approached the woman. The latter did not back away in fear because if the half-immortal wanted her dead, she would be dead by now. Hence, she held her ground firmly. When the black figure arrived at arm-reaching distance from her, she reached out to shake her hand. The woman slowly shook her hand as she felt a sting in her hand. After shaking her hand, the black figure turned around and left. The woman was bewildered. However, she was able to heave a sigh of relief. With the space ring filled with 300,000 gold coins, the woman could settle down somewhere and live the rest of her life peacefully. There was no need for her to risk her life, protecting scums like her current client. The black figure then slowly removed the cloak and hood, revealing her face. It was none other than Gaia. She then flicked her wrist as a ceramic mask appeared in her hand. When she shook the woman's hand, she took a drop of blood from her hand. Gaia dropped the drop of blood onto the ceramic mask. Then she placed the mask on her face. Soon, the ceramic mask trembled as it merged with Gaia's face, turning her into a woman who resembled the mercenary Gaia met a second ago. Gaia planned to take the woman's place from the beginning, one way or another. Now that she had changed her face, she then proceeded to look the part. Thanks to Titus and Optimus, who were in charge of acquiring items for the Order, Gaia managed to get a replica of the woman's silver armor. With a flick of her wrist, she changed the black armor. Eventually, Gaia returned to the carriage she was following behind. Inside the carriage, there was someone who could get her in touch with someone from Han Torum. To pretend to be the mercenary, Gaia needed one last thing to change, her cultivation. Thanks to Michael, she had a special rune that could mimic the energy radiation of a soul refiner. It was a pale blue rune that glistened on her palm before fading away. After everything was said and done, Gaia returned to the carriage, where she met a couple of dwarves drinking and pissing. They seemed to have no shame or care. The dwarf she was about to meet was called Valmas. According to Gaia's sources, Valmas was a weapons dealer and was on his way to Dalgarum to get his hands on the new contraption the dwarves of Han Torum had built. The dwarves snickered and spat on the ground, showing their hatred toward a human. Gaia paid no mind to the dwarves as she opened the carriage door. Inside the carriage, a beefy dwarf with hardly any neck drinking to his throat. He used his long bushy brown beard to clean his hand. When he noticed the woman, a strange smile emerged on his face. As far as Gaia trailed the dwarf, she could tell the dwarf had no interest in women as he had in gold coins. Simply put, the dwarf loved gold coins more than anything. He was even fueling several wars so he could trade weapons with them and get rich. There you are. Took your sweet little time, eh? I am not paying you to protect the tree's love, said the dwarf. Spit and ale splat out of his mouth as he talked. If I am protecting something else and not you, you would have been dead by now. Gaia rolled her eyes. Since she was following the carriage and the woman for 5 days, she knew how the woman would have responded to the dwarf's comment. Haha, the dwarf burst into laughter after hearing her answer. Then, he wiped off his mouth with a cloth and gestured at Gaia to climb inside the carriage. Move your asses. It's time to resume our journey toward Embercrest. The dwarf raised his voice as Gaia sat beside the dwarf. The carriage slowly moved. Gaia took out the silver sword resembling the woman's and sharpened it in the carriage. Looking at the shiny blade, the dwarf kept his distance from Gaia. Their journey was uneventful as no one targeted the dwarf. Eventually, they arrived at the city of Embercrest. The city of Embercrest was built at the base of a mighty mountain and was truly a true modern curiosity. Its appearance was matched by the backdrop of majestic mountains, which have helped shape the city into what it is today. The riches these mountains and the mines in these mountains brought were of great importance. Still, they were also influential when it came to architectural designs, as the vast majority of buildings had been built alongside the mountains and often incorporated many different ores from the mines. The skyline was packed with unique buildings, and a lot of them seemed to have evolved throughout the ages. Daily life wasn't too stressful in Embercrest despite the lack of powerful cultivators. The dwarves substituted the cultivators with contraptions and engineering marvels. As Gaia looked through the window, she noticed the dwarves carrying rocks in a bag on their backs. These dwarves were heading for the city from one of the mines. Since the pavement was paved with stones, their ride was smooth and bumpless. Stone walls surrounded the entire city. In the distance, she saw some giant gears rotating under the waterfall. She read and heard that the dwarves produce lightning energy to power up the city instead of runes and orbs like the rest of the world. Something told her these gears, and the waterfall played a big part in the power generation. I love the smell of Embercrest. Home sweet home, the dwarf laughed. The further they traveled, the more dwarves Gaia saw on the street. Finally, they reached the city gates. To her surprise, she saw a carriage with the symbol of Guardian Guild engraved in went past them into the city. Chapter 805. Thieving Dwarves and a Weapons Dealer. Valmas, the weapon-dealing dwarf, had 5 bodyguards. 3 dwarves and 2 humans. All of them were at the soul-refining stage. In dwarven nations, soul-refining stage warriors were like gods. The strongest dwarven warrior in all dwarven kingdoms was at soul-refining stage level 5, and he served under Drogon, the dwarf king. Furthermore, Valmas had a secret hideout that even his bodyguards had no idea of. He would use a teleportation scroll to get in and out. Hence, why he survived for so long despite being one of the most wanted dwarfs and a weapons dealer. The streets of Embercrest were bustling with dwarves, with the air smelling like freshly brewed ale and piss. Everywhere Gaia turned, she saw the dwarves in clusters, drinking and laughing like it's none of anyone's business. Contrary to the elves, the dwarves seemed simple and honest. The dwarves were hot-headed and honest folks compared to the elves, who were always scheming and using curses for hunting down their enemies. But that didn't mean all the elves were bad and all the dwarves were good. Both sides had bad apples, really bad apples. As Gaia was following behind Voms while keeping him close like a good bodyguard should, she noticed a couple of people following them. Even in the crowd, Gaia was skilled enough to spot her followers. Did I say how much I love the smell of the air? It feels like home. Now, who should I kill to get some freshly brewed Embercrest ale? Valmas joined the dwarves in laughing out loud. Hold your horses, Avamos. We've been followed. Gaia's words immediately stopped Valmas' laughter. She felt good ruining his jolly mood. The three dwarven bodyguards looked dumb while the other human man with rune-engraved bow and arrows looked vigilantly around him. Don't look back, Gaia warned the others. Are they stronger than you dimwits? Asked Valmas. It'd be better if we find your room soon, said Gaia. It's just around the corner. The place is called the Drunken Whore. Fucking hell, Gaia rolled her eyes as they turned around the corner to see a dazzling place totally opposite to its name. The place glistened with neon light and toe-tapping music. Although it was daytime, the dark rainy clouds gave enough darkness for the neon lights to really shimmer. Countless dwarves stood in neat lines to get inside with their dates. In between the two lines was a red carpet and a few people received the VIP treatment by entering the Drunken Whore without waiting. Simply put, this place was the fantasy version of nightclubs. Apparently, Valmas seemed to have the VIP card. He flicked his wrist as a golden plate appeared in his hand. But he stopped before getting closer to the place. Where are you coming, darling? Valams turned around and asked Gaia. Inside. She tilted her head. Nope. You are going to deal with those assholes who've been following us, or do you say? I want their heads. Valmas' eyes glistened with killing intent. What are you waiting for? I am paying you to do what I say, not to gawk like a dumb chicken. Gaia wanted to strangle the dwarf, but she managed to control her inner rage. The rest of you, follow me inside. Valmas gestured as the others followed him behind before throwing a you deserve it look at Gaia. Azazel, I am moving away from the dwarf. Monitor him, Gaia said to Azazel through the earpiece while walking away from Valmas. Got it, Dark Queen. Azazel acknowledged her order and focused on the spider on Valmas himself. After separating herself from Valmas, Gaia entered a dark alley between two tall buildings. She noticed several dwarves on the ground, too drunk to get up. With quick steps and leaps, Gaia reached the top of the building. As a human among dwarves, she stood out like a watchtower. Trailing her followers in her current state would only put a bigger target on her back. That was the reason she chose to get on top of the building. Regardless of the size of the dwarves, their buildings were surprisingly tall and unguarded. Thanks to the buildings being in a cluster, she leaped from one building to another. Eventually, she spotted the dwarves who had followed her earlier. The dwarves were gathered in a group and gawking at the Drunken Whore from a safe distance. Poor souls failed to notice Gaia straight on top of them, watching them like a hawk. How do we get inside? I, for one, cannot stay in the line. No shit. By the time we get inside, he would disappear like he always does. Gaia saw 5 dwarves conspiring against Valmas. Yet she didn't know the reason. To be honest, these dwarves seemed harmless to her. The one who looked like the leader had straps of white in his long bushy beard, and he was the strongest among them, a core formation level 3 warrior. Even if the entire group went against Valams, they would stand a chance against a single bodyguard, let alone all of them. We cannot let him sell the blueprints. Once they get out, who knows how many people will die. The leader dwarf stuttered. Judging by their looks and words, Gaia thought these dwarves were innocent and almost formulated a lie to tell Valmas about their bodies. However, her thoughts were shattered by what they said next. Who cares? We aren't here to save people. We are here to get our money. I almost died snatching those plans. If anything, I should have gotten a bigger cut. Don't be ridiculous. I was the one who found the location of his workshop, said another dwarf. Stop following around, you morons. None of us got paid, not a single coin. That bastard has to pay us with coins and with blood if we played our cards right, said the leader of these little dwarven thieves. Let's get to our safe house and plan our next move. I have someone on the inside who could tell us where Valmas would be next, said another dwarf. Azazel, anything hot happening with Valmas? Asked Gaia as the dwarves began to dismantle their group. Nothing so far, my lady. He's just drinking and dancing with dwarven ladies. I don't think he would be able to do anything for a few hours judging by the amount of booze he drank, said Azazel. The demon was quite surprised by Valmas' ability to drink gallons of ale and stay awake. But I am trailing some dwarves who might have some interesting insights. Happy hunting, Dark Queen. I will keep you updated on Valmas' status, said Azazel as Gaia trailed the dwarves to their hideout. The tables had changed, as it was Gaia who followed the dwarves this time. While she was following them, Gaia noticed the dwarves looking behind to see if anyone was following them, a trait of a thief. She was certain that these dwarves were thieves, but the question was whether they were working for someone or alone. The city of Embercrest was built like a labyrinth. There were more alleys and turns than straight streets and more taverns than any other stores. Luckily, no one was on top of the buildings or watching the skies. Otherwise, they would have seen Gaia jumping from building to building, parkour style. After almost jumping from building to building for 15 minutes, Gaia reached the outskirts of Embercrest, where the infamous dwarves liked to live. This area before her had no tall buildings or lavish stores. Instead, all she could see were tiny huts in clusters and dirty river running across them. Gaia was standing atop the last tall building overlooking the outskirts. One more step, and she would be visible to all the dwarves on the ground. Even if she could sneak without getting detected, she doubted she would fit inside one of those huts. They were barely 4 feet tall. Thanks to Michael's inventions, she had a drone at her disposal. With a flick of her wrist, she took out a drone the size of her palm. It was transparent, as the wire and gears inside were visible to the naked eye. The back of Gaia's neck let out a dim light when the drone started to fly upward. This glimmer of light was a chip that allowed Gaia to control the drone without his or Azazel's help. On top of that, this tiny drone was specially made for her as his gift. It was fast, soundless when flying, and equipped with various types of gases to deal with enemies lethally and non-lethally. Fly, my beautiful night owl. Gaia controlled the drone to fly ahead. I need to work on my naming skills, said Gaia, watching the drone fly toward the dwarves. Suddenly, everything the drone saw popped up in the corner of her vision. This is how he feels, huh? Gaia thought about Michael controlling several drones at the same time. The drone swooped into the hut through a fist-sized hole. The dwarves were too busy searching for mugs and booze. A sane person wouldn't live in the hut for a minute. It looked shabby, dirty, and housed countless cockroaches. Yet, the dwarves didn't seem to mind their house guests. Instead, they filled their mugs and took them to the only piece of furniture that looked relatively new, a table. The dwarves sat around the table to discuss their future plans. They had no idea a drone was hovering above them, listening and watching them. Before they uttered a word, each took a large gulp of ale and didn't bother to wipe their mouths. When will we receive intel from your source? A dwarf asked. He can't fly here, moron. He has a pet owl that would bring the intel to us. We just have to wait, said the leader. Let me guess. Your source is a human. A damned elf would use magic mumbo-jumbo. Any decent dwarf would use a crawler. But only a human would do something so stupid, the dwarves laughed. Don't be too hard on my contact. Without him, we aren't getting near Valmas. It didn't take a genius to figure out the dwarf's inside contact. Because the only human Valmas had around him was her and another bodyguard. But Gaia could care less about him. The only thing she needed from the dwarves was what they sold to Valmas. Chapter 806. Death kissed Crossbow's eye. After waiting an entire hour for the dwarf's contact to arrive, Gaia lost her patience. Azazel had already warned her that Valmas was cleaning himself for some reason. Time to deal with the dwarves, Gaia sighed as she stood up from the floor. With a single leap, she shot into the air and dived down like a breezing wind. No dwarves were able to see her until she broke through the roof. The dwarves were completely caught off guard. They squealed and jumped back like scared cats. Which the fuck are you? You are trespass dash. The dwarves' words choked as they sensed her cultivation. Gaia waved her hand as a translucent dome appeared around them. The shield prevented any sounds from getting out. She didn't want the dwarves to scream for help. Although she could take down the entire kingdom single-handedly, it was neither her intention nor worth her time. So which one of you assholes is going to tell me what you sold to Valmas? Gaia scowled. The dwarves gawked at each other, slowly reaching for the short axes dangling on their waists. For talented builders, the dwarves were stupid when it came to battle. They would rather fight an unwinnable battle head-on without a strategy than keep calm and plan ahead. Gaia's experience was limited when it came to dwarves. The longest conversation she had with a dwarf was about how to build a defense tower in the floating mountain. Instead of warning the dwarves, Gaia waved her hand as a mighty wind blasted off the dwarves into the walls. The dwarves hit the wall with a thud and fell down, coughing and groaning in pain. Her figure quickly turned blurry. The dwarves saw her completely disappear from their sight. When she returned to where she was a moment ago, the dwarves felt something off. They instinctively reached for their axes but didn't find them. To their surprise, Gaia dropped their axes to the ground. Then she dragged a chair and sat backward, looking at the trembling dwarves. Their big round eyes glistened with anger and shock. But despite their cultivation difference, the dwarves didn't show any fear like anyone else would have. The man I am working for wants all of you dead. But I am a merciful and reasonable person. Give me what you sold to Valmas, and we pretend like this never happened, Gaia talked calmly as the dwarves gawked at each other. They were startled, having no idea how the hell did she know about Valmas and the blueprint they sold to him. Also, Valmas wants you all dead. He would pay me handsomely if I brought him your heads. Either way, I am getting paid. The question is, do you want to live or die? Gaia's voice became menacing. Still, the dwarves kept their mouths shut. As a result, Gaia lost her patient. She raised her finger as a green laser-like beam shot out of her fingertips. The next thing the dwarves heard was their leader screaming as loud as he could. Blood spurted out of his left knee. The dwarf groaned and cursed to high heaven. You are dead, human. When the news hits the city, our kind will hunt you down, the dwarves snarled at Gaia as she chuckled. Do you really think your kind can stop me? Gaia asked. Perhaps if the dwarves put a quest with the moguls, they might send some soul refiners after her. But the moguls were known for their expensive price and forbidden cultivation techniques. She doubted the kingdom cared enough about some lowly dwarves enough to approach the moguls in the shadows. Unless you want me to target something you treasure, I suggest you give me what I want. The dwarf leader closed his legs as his heart skipped a beat. Seeing Gaia's fingertip glow, the dwarf leader shouted, Wait. I'll give you what you want. The dwarf leader quickly put his hand inside his robes and threw a yellowish parchment to Gaia. You had a copy of the plans all this time, motherfucker. His dwarven buddies were not at all happy about the leader keeping a copy of the plan. If they knew this, they could have tried to sell the plan to someone else rather than wasting their time trailing Valmas. While the dwarves were bickering back and forth, Gaia opened the parchment to see a blueprint of some kind of crossbow. I have to say, I am disappointed, Gaia sighed. When she heard the dwarves being so secretive, she thought they sold something powerful to Valmas. But instead, it was a blueprint of a crossbow. I can't believe I wasted my time on this. She shook her head disappointedly before putting the blueprint into her space ring. Blueprints and new types of weapons were Michael's thing. Who knows, he might take a weird interest in the thing. After putting the blueprint into her space ring, she stood up from the chair and turned around. She debated with herself whether to kill the dwarves or leave them alive. Honestly, Gaia had no reason to kill them. She could always spin a lie to Valmas about what happened to the dwarves. After a bit of thinking, she decided to leave the dumb dwarves alone. They'll be in the city for a while. So I don't want to see your faces ever again here. Get out. Gaia's voice turned demonic. Her words rang inside their heads until their vision turned blurry. But when she took a step forward to leave the hut, the dwarves made the biggest mistakes of their lives. One daring dwarf threw a pebble at Gaia. It hit her in the head, halting her steps. The dwarves only realized the graveness of their mistake when she turned around with her eyes glimmering with killing intent. At that moment, they knew they fucked it up. Gaia grabbed the chair she was sitting on and dragged it toward the dwarves. While the leader dwarf was screaming in pain, the others frantically looked for something that could be used to fight her. Their minds were blank as they didn't even think about using spells. Not that they had powerful spells in their arsenal. All their spells were more focused on picking locks, finding valuables, and running away. The drunken whore was just as lively inside as it was on the outside. With neon lights, smoke effects, and dancing dwarves, the place was lit with liveliness. Almost everyone inside was dancing to their heart. Valmos was exhausted after dancing and drinking for an hour without a break. He sat in one of the booths built for VIPs. Purple curtains covered the booth and prevented anyone from outside from taking a look inside. Valmas bodyguards flanked the booth from the sides. A while later, Gaia returned to the place. The dwarven bodyguards stopped her in front of the booth. "Where is he?" "Let her inside, moron." Before Gaia could answer the dwarf, Valmas shouted from inside. She entered the booth, pushing aside the dwarf. When she entered the booth, she saw Valmas combing his hair and dusting off his beard. "Well," Valmas looked at Gaia, wordlessly asking her about those who followed them. Gaia grabbed the pouch dangling on her waist and poured out its contents on the table before Valmas. The dwarf creased his brows. Some white things were covered in blood, and a handful of hair fell onto the table. "Is that tooth?" Valmas asked, pointing at a bloody white thing. It took him a few seconds to recognize them. He was no stranger to blood and gory, but even he felt a bit freaked out seeing Gaia pouring down teeth, hair, and pieces of flesh onto the table. Moreover, Valmas could see her bloody fist and blood drops on her face. "You asked me to bring their heads, but this is all I could find in their bodies after I was done with them." Gaia cracked her fists. After the dwarf hit her with the pebble, Gaia showed them hell on earth. She broke every bone in their bodies and almost killed them. When she was done with them, the dwarves wished for death. They became an outlet for her inner fury. Luckily for the dwarves, she didn't wish to kill them. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given them healing potions and thrown them out of the city herself. Since she was a pretty convincing liar, Valmas believed her without a doubt. Plus, he had more urgent things to worry about than some stupid dwarves. "You seem tense," said Gaia as Valmas sighed. "That obvious, huh? I have an important meeting coming up. This deal can change my life forever." The dwarf put down the wooden comb beside all the teeth and hairballs. He then took out a small piece of paper and handed it down to Gaia. "I need you to go down there and make sure it's not a trap." "Better to be safe than sorry," said Valmas. Gaia took a look at the piece of paper to see the name of an abandoned warehouse not very far from the drunken whore. This place was located in a relatively unpopulated area with plenty of escape routes if things went south. Whoever chose this place knew their stuff. "Will do." Gaia turned around and left the booth without saying anything about the mole and the bodyguards. There was a possibility that Valmas would call off the deal if he felt cold feet after hearing about the mole. Valmas' schedule must go uninterrupted for her to get closer to the new weapons built by Han Torum. He was their only lead to get those weapons. The human bodyguard looked tense as he should be. But Gaia didn't do or say anything that could tip him off. After leaving the drunken whore, Gaia headed straight to the meeting spot. Valmas wanted her to make sure it wasn't a trap, and she wanted to equip the place with enough spiders to record their secret deal. Since the streets were filled with dwarves, she could see to the end of the streets. To her surprise, she noticed the carriage with the Guardian Guild crest parked on an alley near a tavern. Coincidentally, the tavern was called the Mountain Guardian. She would have been more surprised if she knew who was staying inside, Noah Winston. Chapter 807. Death Kiss Crossbows. Black ominous clouds blanketed the naked sky, with rackety thunder rumbles in the distance. Deafening gusts of wind swept across the grassy plains. The dense, mossy foliage writhed in the murky darkness. The cold wind lashed the oak trees, making them wave left and right. Thunder roared more intensely, and one could feel the storm ready to pour at any moment. The place Valmas asked Gaia to check out was an abandoned warehouse used to store steel beams. After navigating through the labyrinth of streets, Gaia could see the building as well as the smashed windows, splintered wooden doors, and a sea of wilting moths all over the walls. The building towered like a dormant volcano amidst the wilderness, surrounded by an aura of misty malevolence. As she walked closer to the warehouse, she noticed more and more cracks in the wall. It was a miracle this place was still standing. Again, the buildings built by the dwarves were known for their resilience. Even natural disasters had a hard time destroying the dwarven buildings. The meeting was not till midnight. Hence, no one was around the place, which gave Gaia enough time to prepare and rig the place with spiders. The rusty, iron gate creaked loudly as she pushed it open. Rotten planks and rusted steel beams lay on the ground like withering corpses, shrouded by layers of soot and mud. Meanwhile, the sky split open as the heavy downpour throbbed against the thatched roof. The echoing sound of water dripping cut through the eerie silence. Gaia covered her head with a hood. The several holes in the roof let the rain droplets find their way into the building. A fallen wooden beam used for the ceiling hung from the roof, swaying in the wind like a pendulum. The wooden floor snapped and creaked every step of the way. Gaia noticed an open space in the middle of the warehouse, surrounded by various machines. All of them were rusted and on the verge of crumbling down. Dried leaves and spider webs decorated these once great machines. With a flick of her wrist, Gaia let out a bunch of spiders. They crawled into every corner of the building. She looked around the warehouse for a few minutes to see if anyone was hiding to ambush Valmas. Her senses and eyes found no one in the building. Only then did Gaia exit the building. The rain was picking up its ferocity. She barely saw the buildings in the distance through the heavy rain. Since she had to report back to Valmas, she flew straight back to the drunken whore. By the time she reached the place, Valmas' carriage was waiting for her. Gaia had a shield around her that prevented her from getting drenched in the rain. She climbed into the carriage. "There you are. Any hiccups?" asked Valmas. "No. The place is clean as far as I can tell. Just keep the teleportation scroll close to your chest in case things go south. I pay you to keep things from going south. What good are you if I have to use a precious teleportation scroll every time there is trouble?" Valmas growled. "You pay me to keep you alive. By the look of it, I am doing a good job. Besides, you can't bitch about trouble when you are one of the most wanted weapons dealers in the continent." Valmas couldn't argue with that logic. After some bickering, the carriage headed toward the abandoned warehouse. The clattering sound of rain hitting the carriage roof kept them company. Thanks to the paved roads, the ride was quite comfortable and less bumpy. Eventually, the party arrived at the warehouse, and this time, there was another carriage waiting in front of the building. "They are here," Valmas mumbled after stepping out of the carriage. Gaia saw no crest or words on the carriage that could be used to identify the party inside. Instead, the carriage was painted with pure red and no words. She walked beside Valmas along with the other bodyguards. As she got closer to the warehouse, she sensed more and more powerful beings inside. They were too powerful to be dwarves. Gaia quickly willed her mind to show the feed coming from the silent drone inside the warehouse. To her surprise, she saw a group of orcs waiting for them inside. Not in a million years, she expected the orcs to come to a weapons deal. Despite their grotesque, terrifying looks, the orcs were a peace-loving race. So Gaia wondered what made the orcs meet Valmas of all people. The door creaked open as the dwarves pushed the steel door. There were wooden crates stacked upon each other beside the orcs. These orcs looked different from those she had met in her life. The orcs tend to keep their bodies void of any inks or tattoos. On the contrary, the orcs in the warehouse filled their bodies with paints and weird designs. In addition, they had piercings on their noses, ears, and even their nipples. They also looked beefier and bulkier than typical orcs. If their looks weren't surprising enough, they were all at the peak of the soul-refining stage except the orc, who had painted his entire body red. Gaia noticed a strange fear on Valmas' face. Although she didn't know Valmas for long, she knew he wasn't the type to get scared quite easily. He couldn't afford to be soft-hearted in his line of business. "Took you long enough," the red orc growled. He literally puffed out smoke from his nostrils like a dragon. It was quite strange and terrifying. Gaia hoped these weird orcs wouldn't find out her true cultivation level. Not that she was afraid of them, but she didn't want the deal to go sideways until she learned more about the weapons built by Han Torum. "My dear friends, I hope you had a pleasant journey to Embercrest," Valmas laughed with open arms. Stop with the pleasantries, dwarf. Show me the weapons. The orc did not beat around the bush. He cut short Valmas' pleasantries and growled. Straight to business, eh? I like it. Valmas shrugged off the orc's comment and gestured at them to follow him. The orcs followed Valmas to the wooden crates. When Valmas touched the crate, several runes and chakras glimmered on their surface. For a dwarf who hated elves to the core, he was using elven runes to protect the wooden crates. It didn't surprise Gaia. To a criminal like Valmas, his products and coins were more important than their race's beef with the elves. The wooden crate on top click opened, revealing a bunch of handheld crossbows on top of the hay. These crossbows looked precisely the same as the crossbow Gaia saw on the blueprint. Now she was curious about these tiny crossbows. Judging by the look of them, she couldn't help wondering what they were capable of. As promised, I present you the Death Kiss crossbows. You can change the name however you want after buying them, said Valmas. 10,000 apiece. I have a total of hundreds of them made for you. As I said in the letter, the blueprint is sold separately. It will cost you 10 million. Before that, I need to see if the weapon does what you claim it would, said the orc. Valmas creased his brows. I didn't bring any poor saps, said Valmas as a strange devilish grin emerged on the red orc's face. Let me take care of that, said the orc. He then clapped his hands as the steel door opened once again. They all turned their gazes at the door to see two orcs dragging a few sacks through the muddy ground. The sacks moved and groaned. Each sack contained something alive, squirming inside. For some reason, Gaia had a bad feeling. The orcs picked up the sacks one by one and tossed them a few meters away from Valmas and the orcs. One of the orcs who stood behind the red orc went to the sacks and untied the top. What jumped out of the sacks was none other than the dwarves Gaia almost beaten to death. These stupid dwarves managed to get caught by the orcs. She explicitly made it clear to go through the forest and escape the kingdom. Valmas frowned, looking at the 5 dwarves. They claim they stole the blueprint that you used to build these crossbows. Let's just say I believe them, said the orc. What do you have to say for yourself, dwarf? The red orc asked with his eyes glimmering with murderous glee. They speak the truth, they stole the plans for me. I am a weapons dealer, not a weapons builder. They don't have the blueprint anymore. I possess the blueprint now, Valams said, throwing his hands in the air. The thieving dwarves were shocked to see Gaia. Fortunately, their mouths were tied with cloth. They are loose ends that need to be taken care of, the orc spoke in his thick, murderous voice. Then, the orc picked up a crossbow and placed it on Valmas' hands. Take care of them, said the orc before looking over his shoulder at the other orcs for some reason. One of the orcs nodded and went to the dwarves, who were on their knees. The orc murmured something under his breath as a golden shield appeared before each dwarf. Gaia's curiosity was piqued. She didn't worry about the dwarves exposing her identity because if things went south, she could always kill them all. But fortunately, Valmas had no idea the dwarves who followed them and the dwarves before him were the same. Otherwise, he would have been pissed at her for lying to him. Whoa, Valmas threw a fit. I don't get my hands dirty. That's why I have these morons. Valmas' gaze swept across the bodyguards. Let one of my underlings pull the trigger, said Valmas. I don't see any problem with that, said the orc. The thieving dwarves groaned, but no words escaped their mouths. Here, Valmas handed over the crossbow to Gaia. Then he looked at the orc as he nodded. Only then did Valmas take out a steel ball the size of a grape and give it to Gaia. Put that in here, Valmas pointed at the hole on top of the crossbow. When she brought the steel ball close to the hole, an invisible force pulled the steel ball inside. Kill them all, said Valmas as the thieving dwarves groaned louder. The fear for their lives flashed across their eyes. Gaia raised the crossbow, aiming at the dwarves. The crossbow was surprisingly lighter in weight, and she really wanted to know what it could do. Come on, pull the trigger, Valmas urged Gaia. Chapter 808 Invitation to Han Torum Auction Death Kiss crossbow was a masterfully crafted crossbow with a rare sample of willow. Its string was made from deluxe wolf sinew. The wolf sinew was a fairly rare material around these parts of the world. The crossbow's limbs had been decorated with ebony details and ended in long points ornamented with delicate decorations. The stock was wrapped in dark leather and decorated with sigil decorations. In the hands of a master archer such as Gaia herself, this crossbow was capable of firing arrows up to 200 meters while still retaining lethal power. The appearance of the crossbow suggested master craftsmanship. Whoever built the crossbow had to be at least a 4-star blacksmith. Gaia held the crossbow firmly in her hand as her index finger brushed the trigger. With a single pull of the trigger, Gaia could find out why the orcs were so interested in this crossbow. But pulling the trigger meant death for those stupid yet poor dwarves. She herself was curious to see what the crossbow was capable of. The dwarves cried, but no words escaped their mouths. They knew they were staring death in the face. At that moment, they regretted coming out of the forest to steal from Valmus. Greed for gold coins blinded them. As a result, they were about to lose their lives. In her defense, Gaia did warn the dwarves of the danger and gave them a chance to escape. Still, the dwarves managed to get caught. That wasn't her fault. Even if she didn't want to kill the dwarves, sparing them would ruin her disguise and make enemies out of these strange orcs. Despite the orcs' spooky looks, Gaia didn't intend to make enemies out of them. Instead, she wanted to learn more to see if she could recruit them into their army. Furthermore, sparing the dwarves might ruin her chance to learn more about the weapons built by Han Torum, which she couldn't allow to happen. Therefore, the dwarves had to die. Finally, Gaia pulled the trigger as the steel ball shot out of the crossbow and exploded midway into countless pellets. The crossbow surprisingly didn't have any recoil. Gaia didn't even feel like she fired a powerful steel ball until she saw the leader dwarf's head explode into a red mist. The blood splattered on the other dwarves as the air reeked of blood. The leader dwarf's headless body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Blood oozed out of his messed-up neck. Headshot! Valmas shouted excitedly. Everyone was surprised, but what surprised Gaia was how the pellets completely ignored the energy shield. Did you see that? A headshot could kill a core formation warrior despite any defense shields, as I said, Valmas explained, grinning from ear to ear. But not everyone is as good as my sexy bodyguard here. Valmas threw a sly grin at Gaia. He wasn't moving, the red orc growled. He wasn't as impressed as Valmas. The red orc was not wrong. Anyone with a little bit of skill could hit a stationary target from a 5-meter distance. Even a blind man had the chance for a headshot in that short distance. Hey, race another ball. Valmas threw another steel ball and gestured at Gaia to reload the crossbow. The orc threw a dubious look at the dwarf as he tapped the wooden crate. One crate contains all the ammunition you asked for. After reloading the crossbow, Gaia pointed it at another dwarf and pulled the trigger. She had already killed one, so it wasn't a big deal for her to end the others. One by one, the dwarves lost their heads. Blood sprayed out from their neck as the orcs looked satisfied. Eventually, the golden shield before the dwarves faded away. The crossbow hooked up Gaia. She didn't use a bit of energy, yet she killed 4 body-strengthening stages and 1 core formation warrior despite the energy shield. Now she realized why the orcs were interested in the crossbows. Although Gaia didn't believe these crossbows could do anything to anyone above core strengthening stage warriors, these crossbows could change the tide of war since most wars were fought by soldiers who were mainly at body-strengthening stage. When 2 powerful cultivators fought, the Guardian Guild would interfere to broker peace or one of the great 8 clans. On the contrary, when 2 kingdoms went into war and thousands of soldiers fought, the Guardian Guild ensured the battle was fought in a controlled environment. For instance, when the Duke of Flamefair waged war against Pentown and Icefair, the Guardian Guild did nothing. Gaia had already decided to bring the blueprint to Michael and mass-produce these crossbows. Knowing Michael and his talent for building powerful stuff, Gaia was confident he would make changes to the crossbow and build something extraordinary from the blueprint. After she killed all the dwarves, the red orc threw a silver ring at Valmus. The dwarf licked his lips, looking into the space ring. Wonderful! The dwarf clapped his hands together. He then took out a parchment worn out by the time and handed it over to the orc. The red orc opened the parchment, took a look at it, and nodded at Valmas. Pleasure doing business with you. Now, what about the thing I asked? Valmas kneaded his hands as though he was waiting for something from the orcs. The orc put his hand into the belt around his waist and pulled out a golden card with some letters embossed on it. This will get you inside. Remember, this is the invitation, and whoever holds it gets the right to participate in the auction, said the orc. Gaia glanced over Valmas' shoulder at the golden card. Although the words embossed on the card were nearly unreadable, she was able to make out the words Han Torum. Connecting the dots, Gaia realized she was one step closer to getting the weapons built by Han Torum. The red orc signaled his underlings to carry the wooden crates and follow him to the carriage outside. While the orcs were clearing out the crates, Valmas stared at the golden card in his hand with his eyes sparkling. Eventually, the orcs left the warehouse with the crates, leaving Valmas and his bodyguards behind. Gaia waited until the orcs were completely out of the area. Then, she took a step forward, snatching the golden card from Valmas' hand. "Chai," the dwarf shouted. Gaia completely ignored him and read the words on the card. Place, the Lily Hall. Time, morning 8 on the 10th. Gaia read the words as the bodyguards tensed. "What do you think you are doing?" Valmas bellowed again. "Sorry, Valmas. You should wait for the next auction." Gaia shrugged as Valmas' eyes glistened with anger and disbelief. "Are you tired of living, bitch?" The two dwarven bodyguards behind Valmas growled. Instead of answering the dwarves, she just closed her eyes as her silver armor faded away and the black Dark Queen armor replaced it. When the transformation finished, the dwarves took a step back. Valmas was terrified. As a weapons dealer, he was aware of everything that had been happening throughout the world. So naturally, he knew everything about the Dark Lord and his better half, the Dark Queen. The dark armor and the red flaming eyes were dead giveaways. The human bodyguard, on the other hand, collapsed to the ground in utter fear. Even in many humans were scared shitless of the Dark Lord, especially those who migrated to from Azer. "The Dark Lord wants this," said Gaia in her demonic voice. She released her suppressed aura of a half-immortal. As soon as they felt the overwhelming power, they trembled before her. Valmas was speechless. He may not have been as afraid as the human bodyguard of his, but her half-immortal power left him no choice other than to hand over the invitation he had worked so hard for. He had to call in all the favors to meet the orcs and get the card to participate in the Han Torum auction. Every fiber in his dwarven body told him to unsheath his battle axe and chop her head off. However, he was not stupid enough to do so. "Can I come with you as your +1? Valmas tried to negotiate with the Dark Queen. He couldn't let go of the golden opportunity to participate in the auction. "You could," Gaia rubbed her chin as a smile merged on Valmas' face. But the next words that came out of her mouth froze his smile. "But you would be dead by then," said Gaia. She was nonchalant. Before they could react, a thick green smoke enveloped them. Immediately, the dwarves and the human bodyguard began to cough. Blood dribbled from every hole in their bodies. Their eyes widened as they turned jade. Soon, their bodies began to melt down like wax statues in heat. "One less weapons dealer for the world," Gaia snickered. No one would shed a single tear for Valmas. Instead, the world would be a better place without him. From this point onward, there wouldn't be anyone to sell weapons to both sides and kindle wars between kingdoms. After killing them, Gaia put the invitation into her space ring. "Azazel, it's done," said Gaia to Azazel through the earpiece. "The Han Torum is going to sell their weapons in an auction. I think Noah or one of his underlings will participate and bid for the weapons. You may want to return to the castle and pick a dress for the occasion, my lady," said Azazel. Usually, Gaia hated wasting precious gold coins on expensive dresses like the other noble women. But this auction was something special. If Noah or the Guardians were attending the auction, she needed to be there. For some reason, she doubted she could steal or destroy the weapons built by one of the great 8 clans. She must attend the auction and see who buys the weapons. Unfortunately, the Dark Lord's castle was short of gold coins. Therefore, Gaia planned to steal the weapons or destroy them from whoever buys them in the auction tomorrow. Meanwhile, Inside the demon's grave, Michael was sitting before a campfire with Vidora by his side. The demon's grave darkened as he heard countless creepy noises in the distance. After roaming around the place for 2 days, he had grown used to the sounds. "Get some sleep. I have a feeling tomorrow is going to be a long day," said Michael. Chapter 809 Armored Salamandipede. After resting at the fire for a few hours with Vidora, Michael resumed his journey through the demon's grave. Instead of buying the map of the demon's grave, Michael wandered aimlessly. Eventually, he came across a meadow once that looked as if it was stripped out from the pages of a storybook. The grass was Eden green and thigh-high to a thrush. There was a volcanic mountain in the distance that had peaks that looked as cruel as a hag's teeth. The mountain looked off in some mysterious way. Yet again, everything in the demon's grave looked eerie, especially when a thin veil of mist was covering them. Compared to the swamps and the dark forest Michael came through, the meadows were a paradise. Except for the white mist covering the meadows, everything else looked peaceful. It wasn't just the sights that pleased the senses, but also the air had a tinge of sweetness to it. The pitch-black sky above the meadow added an extra charm to the place, and the only light source Michael had was the fuming volcanic mountain in the distance. The lava oozing out of the mountain dimly lit the meadows with its hue of orange. Michael walked through the meadows, gently brushing the grass and flowers with his hands. It was a feast for the eyes. The meadow stretched as far as the eye could see, with no monsters in the near vicinity. Vidora flew out from his shoulder and chased what seemed to be fireflies in a dance of life and death. Almost 15 minutes later, Michael noticed a neon blue ribbon of river running through the meadow. The song of the river was very gentle as it went plinking and tinkling over the gravel bed. Michael halted his steps for a moment and bent down to wash his face with the clear river water. He immediately felt refreshed by the cold water. As he was washing his face, a cold breeze brushed past him. The grass waving with the wind, coupled with the river, sounded like music to Michael's ears. Since Sarba had enhanced senses, he could smell the sweetness of cherry blossoms and the soft caramel scent of flowers in the air. It was so soothing that he wanted to lie down against a mossy rock and drift into a deep sleep. The humidity rendered into dewdrops on the grass. For a few minutes, the sky drizzled. But the clouds soon passed, leaving the grass and earth to steam gently like druid smoke. Michael thoroughly washed his face, head, and the back of his neck. He even dipped into the river and came back to wash off the mud from his robes. The swamp really did a number on his outfit. Fortunately, the river was shallow enough for him to cross to the other side. His target was the volcanic mountain in the distance. The volcanic mountain held 3 items he needed to forge the dark swords. After getting those items, he planned to venture deeper into the demon's grave to change their financial status. But he doubted either of these tasks would be easy. He had the feeling the peace and quiet he was enjoying might come to an end soon. As he expected, he sensed a half-immortal being nearby. The being was on his way to the mountain. "Did you sense it?" Sarba asked Michael as Vidora flew back to Michael. Michael nodded. Instead of heading straight toward the being, Michael flicked his wrist as several drones materialized above him. All the drones flew in the monster's direction as Michael concentrated on their feeds. To Michael's surprise, he did not see any monster through the drone feeds. The meadows looked peaceful and quiet. "I am not seeing any monster," Michael said to Vidora. "It can't be. I sensed a powerful being." "Something is there, ghost," said Sarba. He was absolutely certain that he sensed a monster near them. If he had to bet, he would say it was waiting for them 20 meters ahead of them. The howling wind breezed past Michael. He was not in a rush but strolled toward the monster. If he could fly, he might have flown around the monster instead of fighting. However, he decided to fight the monster because he wanted to challenge himself. Plus, slaying a half-immortal monster would give him millions of experience points. After Gaia killed the dwarves, Valmans, and his bodyguards, Michael needed only 400,000 experience points to reach the next level. The closer he got to the monster, the shakier the ground felt. Michael halted his steps and looked at the meadows before him. At first look, the meadows looked no different than the rest. But when Michael looked closer, he noticed an unevenness on the ground, as though something was hiding beneath the meadows. Michael raised his hand as a pebble flew straight into his hand. He then threw the pebble at the ground, where he suspected the monster resting. The pebble hit the ground with a thud, yet nothing happened. Michael threw another pebble, hoping to rile up the monster. He had a feeling the monster was waiting to ambush him. Poor bastard didn't have any idea that Michael had already sensed it. When Michael threw the third pebble, he heard a muffled roar. Brown dust storm emerged from the ground as Michael heard something heavily exhaling. Soon, the ground beneath him trembled. Michael took a step back. The monster hiding beneath slowly emerged from the ground, revealing his full body. It was a long reptilian monster that looked like a hybrid of a salamander and a centipede. The monster crawled out of the hole with its hundreds of tiny golden legs, sticking his long tongue out. Silver scales covered his body from top to bottom. The gigantic monster was at least 50 feet in length. It hissed at Michael, staring at him with its tiny blue eyes. Suddenly, the monster dived down, digging into the ground. Michael immediately activated his X-ray eyes to locate the creature in the ground. The monster dug its way out of the place where Michael was a second ago before jumping away. The area suddenly grew darker as Michael cast the death range. Moreover, the cloud of darkness shrouded Michael's body, completing his Dark Lord form. The dark beams shot out of his eyes. To his surprise, the dark beams bounced off the shiny scales covering the monster. The dark beams didn't even put a dent in the monster's body. Someone else would have been shocked and felt discouraged, but Michael felt excited. As a blacksmith, he could do wonders with scales as strong as these. Since gravity restricted him from flying, Michael couldn't use aerial attacks. Hence, he cast the lightning dash to move around the monster. The monster's scales let out a dim jade light as it fired a blob of boiling hot poison toward Michael. He was lucky enough to dash away, but when the poison hit the ground, everything around it for a 1-meter radius turned into nothing but ash. The ground sizzled like hot oil. Meanwhile, the monster kept firing blobs of poison repeatedly. Despite its gigantic size, the monster was extremely agile and quick. If the poison was not enough to burn the meadows, Michael cast the ring of fire and fired waves of dark flames at the monster. The dark flames burnt everything to ashes on their way. Although the dark beams bounced off the monster's scales, the dark flames managed to burn the monster. It roared in pain. But it didn't suffer much damage as Michael wanted it to. Ignitia, Michael cast the spell as black lightning bolts shot out of his fingertips. The air was electrified with his lightning bolts. Vidora heard the crackling lightning bolts and the creature's roar and flew away from Michael and the monster. When a half-immortal and an immortal were fighting, it was not a good idea to be in their way. Sabers saw the energy around them going haywire. As a result, dark clouds appeared out of nowhere above them, threatening them with a heavy downpour. Thunderclaps echoed through the demon's grave. The monster kept disappearing into the ground and jumping out to catch Michael off guard. Michael fought the monster with lightning bolts and dark flames. Suddenly, the monster sprayed poisonous liquid from its mouth. The poison immediately enveloped them, hindering Michael's sight. Fortunately, the Dark Lord armor had a mask he bought from the system and fitted with a filtering system he built inside. The mask filtered the poison ion in the air and gave him fresh air. Michael thought he had overcome the poisonous air with his mask. But he didn't expect the monster to light the poisonous cloud with sparks. When the monster opened its mouth, sparks flew out. The poisonous air exploded in the blink of an eye. The explosion sent Michael flying. Although the responsive shield and the cloud of darkness saved him, he wasn't completely unharmed by the explosion. His whole body was cut and bruised, as well as had a couple of broken ribs. The explosion would have reduced a fusion stage cultivator if they were caught in one. It was powerful enough to hurt a god. Michael slowly picked himself up as the APD pumped a healing potion into his body. His poor armor was half burned and had countless holes and cuts. Michael wiped off the blood dribbling down his mouth. The monster hissed, crawling toward Michael without waiting for him to retaliate. "Why isn't he moving?" I asked, looking at Michael standing still. The monster moved closer and closer to Michael. It opened its mouth wide to bite and swallow his body as a whole. The ground near Michael trembled as the monster moved closer to him. Still, he didn't even budge from where he was standing. The monster was just an arm-reaching distance from him. It raised its body, opening its mouth wide. Ayag almost closed her eyes when she saw the monster reach Michael. But to her shock, she heard a loud bang before the monster went flying away. The monster crashed down on the ground. Vidora was stunned. They all turned their gazes back to Michael to see the Doombringer emanating coldness in his hand. Only Kane saw the Doombringer appear in Michael's hand, and him swinging it with enough force to send the giant monster flying. Several scales on the monster's body tumbled down, leaving the monster's soft skin exposed. Chapter 8:10 Almighty Doombringer. After getting the Ancient Ice Core from the Aqua Auction and Blacksmith trait, Michael infused the Ancient Ice Core with the Doombringer. As a result, the Doombringer could summon frost and freeze its target upon hitting. Michael didn't let the monster stand up and attack him again. Instead, he threw the Doombringer, aiming for the monster's head. The Warhammer soared through the air, leaving a cold trail in the air. The coldness emanating from the Doombringer caused the temperature to drop by several degrees. It hit the monster in the head as the scales covering its head cracked but didn't break down. Michael dashed at the monster using the lightning dash. The black lightning bolts crackled around his body. Even from afar, Sarba could sense the electricity in the air. On his way to the monster, Michael raised his hand in the air as the Doombringer flew straight back into his hand. Fighting against gravity with his sheer brute strength, Michael leaped into the air. Vidora was stunned to see how high Michael could jump in the air. Gravity pulled him down, increasing the force of his descent. Upon nearing the monster, Michael clenched the Doombringer's handle as bone-chilling ice covered the Doombringer from top to bottom. Michael brought down the Warhammer on the monster's head while it was preparing to fire a poison blob at Michael. The collision produced a thunderous boom. Several scales on the monster's head cracked. They weren't frail by any means, but Michael was strong enough to crack them with his brute force. The monsters in the demon's grave defied all the typical rules of the world outside. Usually, a half-immortal would be no match for an immortal. However, inside the demon's grave, the monsters had traits and attribute to match the cultivation power of a higher being. For instance, the salamandipede was covered with silver scales that protected it from even the most powerful spells and attacks. If anyone else at the immortal stage fought the salamandipede, they would have been devoured by now. Its poison blobs were powerful enough to melt down an immortal to jelly. In other words, the monsters inside the demon's grave didn't need immortal-killing weapons to kill half-immortals or immortals. Hence, why even the most powerful cultivators didn't dare to visit the demon's grave. Still, Michael fought the monster head-to-head without going all out. After receiving a blunt force trauma to its head, the monster roared. Emerald green poison splattered out its mouth. Although the monster lacked facial features, it looked very pissed off. The monster swung its long tail and hit Michael in midair. Fortunately, Michael clenched his fist at the right time to bring out his black shield. The sheer force of the monster's brute force sent Michael flying. While he was in the air, the monster fired blobs of poison at Michael. These blobs took the shape of arrows and soared through the air to hit Michael. Once again, Michael raised his shield and shrouded himself with the cloud of darkness to protect himself from the poisonous arrows. The arrows splashed across the ground after hitting the black shield. Unfortunately, a drop of poison hit Michael's boots, making a sizzling noise. Michael immediately swung his legs, throwing away the boots before the poison could touch his skin. "You owe me a pair of boots, mister," said Michael after landing on his bare feet on the ground. Michael stared at the monster with the Doombringer and black shield in each hand. He cracked his neck. On the other side, the monster hissed before digging down into the ground. Despite its colossal size, the monster was quick to dig down and hide. Thanks to Michael's X-ray vision, he could see the tunnels down the ground and the monster. The monster was holding to catch Michael off guard, but he was waiting for the right movement to hit the monster with the Doombringer. He raised the Doombringer in the air as cold energy swirled around the battlehammer. Even from afar, Vidora felt the bone-chilling coldness of the Doombringer. This was the first time Vidora had seen Michael use the Doombringer to its full potential. Typically, Michael would finish the battle without using any weapons. But the monster forced him to take out the Doombringer, which showed how powerful the monster was. The ground beneath Michael kept trembling. He waited for the monster as it crawled toward him underground. Michael took a few steps back as the monster raised its head out of the ground. The moment its head came out of the ground, Michael hit its head with the Doombringer once again. This time, he covered the Doombringer's head with a block of ice to add extra damage to the monster. The monster dashed out of the ground and squirmed in pain. Michael immediately followed up his attack with the Ring of Fire. The monster's head was already covered in a layer of frost, and when the dark flames hit the ice, the scales shattered. Finally, Michael figured out the monster's weakness. The sturdy scales were vulnerable to ice plus fire attacks. They could withstand one element but not both. Since the scales were shattered, the monster's head was exposed. But when he was about to fire dark beams, the monster spewed poison from its mouth. It formed a cloud of green mist around the monster. To avoid an explosion like earlier, Michael immediately dashed away from the monster. To Michael's surprise, a strange glow appeared in the monster's head. Soon, the scales grew back, covering its exposed head. Michael creased his brows. Having a regeneration ability brought the battle to the next level. It was time for Michael to change his tactics. The cloud of poisonous mist gave Michael an idea. He dashed away and fired a bolt of lightning at the monster. As Michael planned, the lightning bolt lit the highly flammable poison cloud. The sound of the explosion echoed through the air, but the creature's roar overshadowed the explosion. Both Michael and the monster were blasted into opposite directions. Even a 30-meter distance between them didn't prevent Michael from getting blasted away. Luckily, he just suffered some trauma that healed up in a few seconds, thanks to the APD. The same could not be said for the monster. Dark smoke enveloped the area around the monster. Michael had to use his thermal vision to locate the monster. As far as he could see, the monster was squirming as green slimy blood oozed out of several places in its body. Furthermore, it lost several of its legs to the explosion. Instead of dashing at the monster headstrong, Michael clenched the Doombringer around its pommel and its neck right beneath the head. His grip tightened as he pointed the head toward the monster. The runes engraved in the head glimmered with icy blue color. Soon, a stream of frost energy shot out of the Doombringer toward the monster. Everything around Michael froze by the frost energy shooting out of the battlehammer. Crystal ice rocks formed around the monster, slowly freezing it from head to toe. The monster squirmed as the crystals forming around it crumbled down. Yet, Michael did not stop freezing the monster. He poured more energy into the Doombringer, creating colder frost energy. The frost energy was cold enough to create a rain of snowflakes around Michael. The monster hissed as the frost covered its body with a thick layer of ice. If gaze could kill one, Michael would have died by now. Squirming and hissing did not help the monster. Therefore, it fired poison blobs out of its mouth. Michael slowly moved toward the monster while keeping the frost beam focused on the monster. Coldness ran down Michael's spine. Even he wasn't spared by the coldness as a thin layer of ice formed on his skin. Nonetheless, Michael chose not to conjure the dark flames. Gradually, the frost energy formed a thick shell around the monster, preventing it from digging into the ground or moving its body freely. By the time Michael reached 5 meters distance from the monster, the ice had covered every inch of the monster's body except its eyes. Without wasting a second, Michael cast the Ring of Fire. A powerful wave of dark flames shot out of Michael's body. At that moment, extreme coldness met its opposite. The ice crystal layer on the monster's body shattered along with its silver scales. Green slimy blood splattered across the ground as Michael raised his shield to protect himself from the poisonous blood. With no scales, the monster's pinkish body was exposed to the world. Fear and shock emerged in the monster's tiny eyes. It hissed with fear. When Vidora thought the monster's life was over, the monster pulled its trump card up its sleeves. The monster slowly opened its mouth as Michael felt a powerful force sucking him into its mouth. Michael was left with no time to react. In a blink of an eye, he was in the monster's mouth. However, the monster couldn't close its mouth. Michael held its mouth wide open with the Doombringer on its palate. "We have to help him," said Iag as Vidora flew toward Michael and the monster. The monster frantically shook its head, trying to close its mouth and devour Michael. The light of life was slowly leaving away the monster's eyes. If one had to guess, one would say the monster had pulled a trick to kill both Michael and itself. Every bit of muscle in Michael's body tensed as veins bulged up on his face. As soon as Vidora reached the monster, they were surprised to see Michael smiling. No one in their right mind would smile stuck in a monster's mouth, but he did. Vidora was speechless. Judging by the smile on his face, they could tell he did not need their help. The monster, on the other hand, completely ignored Vidora and frantically shook its head left and right, hoping Michael would let go of the Doombringer in his hand. Occasionally missing content, please report errors in time. Chapter 8:11 Mount Hades. Standing inside the monster's mouth, Michael held its mouth open with the Doombringer and his other hand. Slowly, Michael moved the hand that was holding the Doombringer down. The monster almost snapped its mouth close, but Michael was strong enough to keep it open with one hand. He then raised the Doombringer as a bone-chilling frost beam shot straight down the monster's throat. Vidora heard the monster roar in agonizing pain. The monster went crazy. It swings its entire body left and right to throw out Michael. No matter how hard the monster tried to lose Michael and shoot him with a poison blob, it simply couldn't. Unlike the monster's outer body, its inside was soft tissue and flesh. The frost from the Doombringer crystallized the monster from within. If Michael wanted, he could send a stream of dark flames into the monster's throat and burn it from the inside. However, Michael had other plans for the monster. Instead of killing the monster, he froze the monster to the point it stopped struggling. He turned around before hitting the monster's palate with the Doombringer. The pointy end of the Doombringer hooked into the skin. Michael moved the Doombringer slightly forward as the monster crawled forward like a remotely controlled toy. Vidora was utterly speechless. They thought Michael would kill the monster when he had the chance. Instead, he was driving the monster toward the volcanic mountain in the distance. No one would have dared to make such a daring move. But making such uncanny moves was what made Michael the Dark Lord. The monster was already half dead. Its poison glands and organs were frozen. Vidora followed behind the monster while keeping a safe distance from it. Only while following the monster did they notice several others, like the monster Michael was riding from its mouth. Some of the salamandripedes were bigger and stronger than the monster before them. Even if Michael had killed one, he would have faced several on his way to the mountain. As much as Michael liked to hunt these monsters down and earn experience points, he valued his life and everything he had achieved till now more. Until the system reached level 10, where he could construct a body for himself in case he was killed, he had to keep himself safe. The meadows were littered with hundreds of salamandripedes. Coupled with weird gravity that prevented one from flying, even a group of immortals would be slain in the area. The more time they spent in the demon's grave, the more Vidora learned the dangers lurking in the realm. This was why even the seasoned immortals dared not to venture into the demon's grave despite the rare and priceless treasures within. A few weeks ago, Noah prepared himself to venture into the demon's grave, hoping the place would temper him and enhance his battle prowess. However, Andreas outright stopped him without giving Noah a choice. Andreas didn't think Noah was ready for the dangers in the demon's grave. To be honest, Andreas was right. Noah would have lost his life in a few hours if he had chosen to enter the realm. God or no god, one must be at least at the immortal stage to survive the demon's grave. The past Dark Lord made sure of that. Although the demon's grave was one of the past Dark Lord's regrets, only Michael could survive and close the realm. For some reason, the monsters in the demon's grave didn't attack Vidora. Some of the monsters dug into the ground the moment they saw Vidora. Looking at this weird behavior of the monsters, dark lines appeared on Iag's forehead. She turned her gaze toward Kane since he was the smartest among the three of them. Hey Kane, did you see how they went inside the ground when they saw us? It's weird, right? Said I. After hearing Iag's remarks, Sarba shared his thoughts with Kane. I also have this strange feeling that we and this place have some kind of connection. They weren't wrong to have these feelings. But the truth was far more than they could even dream of. Almost 4,000 years ago, before the Dark Lord reset the universe, a brutal world-ending war happened between two otherworldly races. The war had two sides. One side had thousands of demons, and the other side had only one fighter, the three-headed Hydra, Vidora. If so, we will get some answers before we leave this place, said Kane. He didn't let Sarba and Iag know what he felt about this place. Unlike him, they were influenced by emotions rather than their brain. Until Ghost figured out what had really happened in this realm, Kane didn't want to come to any conclusions. Eventually, Michael reached the volcanic mountain base. Dark smoke and ash littered the ground as well as the air. The smell of fire nauseated them. As soon as they reached the mountain base, the high temperature caused the ice layer on the monster to crack. After the ice shattered, Michael was afraid of the monster healing back to its full strength. Therefore, Michael cast the ring of fire and ignitia at the same time. Black lightning bolts crackled around Michael's hand before hitting the monster's throat. Following the black lightning bolt, a stream of dark flames rushed into the monster's mouth, burning its flesh to well done. The monster roared and squirmed as Vidora's senses were overwhelmed by the burning flesh. Soon, the monster lost its strength to squirm and collapsed down. Its body shrunk as green slimy blood oozed out of its skin. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a half-immortal level 7 monster. The reward is 1 million experience points and 10,000 badass points. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully being a badass. The reward is 15,000 badass points. Michael heard the system in his mind. Not even a second passed as Michael felt warmth throughout his body. This was a familiar feeling. He had leveled up. Congratulations to host Michael for leveling up. The current stage is Immortal level 5. Vidora flew around the monster's lifeless body as Michael stepped out of its mouth. Without even looking around the mountain, Michael squatted down the monster's body and ran his fingers through its scales. After the explosion and fire plus ice attack, the monster lost most of its scales. He fired the dark beams out of his eyes, cutting out the few scales on its body. Vidora saw Michael peeling out the scales with a sickening screeching sound. He seemed unbothered by the blood and gore. On the contrary, he was whistling a strange tune and enjoying collecting the scales. It took him almost an hour to collect all the scales. At that moment, he sat before a pile of scales. Kane counted 34 scales in total. Each of them was diamond-shaped in the size of a grown man's palm. They wondered what Michael could do with so few scales. But after seeing the sorry state of his current armor, their first guess was new armor. After stripping the scales from the monster's body, Michael raised his hand, firing streams of dark flames from his hands. Without the scales, the monster's body couldn't withstand the dark flames. It slowly burned down to a hot pile of ashes and bones. Michael slightly bowed, paying his respect to the monster. When Michael turned around, he saw Vidora staring at him with bewildered looks on their faces. "You have something in mind?" Michael asked, tilting his head. "We are wondering what kind of connection we have with this place," said Iag. Her words reminded Michael of the green glow in Kane's mouth that resembled the realm tear earlier. Just like Kane, Michael didn't want to say anything before he learned more about the demon's grave. Since the mysterious woman said the demon's grave was one of his mistakes, he had a feeling it might be related to Vidora somehow. But for the time being, Michael decided to stay silent on the matter. "I'd say let's explore the place more before making any assumptions," said Michael. Iag heaved a heavy sigh and nodded. Finally, Michael turned his focus to the giant mountain before him. It looked bigger and mightier in close. Once again, Michael tried to ascend into the air but ultimately failed due to gravity. The required items needed to forge the dark swords are inside the mountain. "It seems like the host has to climb the mountain. I hope you are good at it," the system said. Weirdly, The system sounded amused by his conundrum. The volcanic mountain was none like Michael had ever seen in his life. Its ashen cone would grow hot and, with a great surging and throbbing, pour forth rivers of molten rock from chasms in its sides. Some flowed blazing down great channels. Some winded their way into the stony plain until they cooled and lay like twisted dragon shapes vomited from the tormented earth. The heat emanated from the molten lava was enough to burn a core formation warrior to dust. Vidora lifted their heavy heads as the mountain filled all their sight, looming vast before them. The growling mountain sounded like a hungry beast waiting to devour everything with its molten lava. Its cone-shaped top reached for the sky, shrouded in a huge mass of ash and sparks of fire. Just looking at the mountain hurt Michael's neck. He sighed, thinking of climbing the mountain through the oozing lava and uneven terrain. He was a hitman, not a mountain climber. Although he had training climbing walls and mountains, this fuming chimney of a mountain was not an ordinary one that anyone could climb. At least he had Mark III grappling hook to help him climb. After taking a long deep breath, Michael walked toward the mountain. He grabbed the edges and started to climb up. "Are you sure about this?" Kane asked Michael. "Don't look down. It might help," said Sarba with a worried face. "Relax. I got this," said Michael. While Michael was climbing up, a sense of déjà vu hit him. He felt like he had climbed the mountain before. But he ignored all the doubts and focused on the task at hand. Chapter 8:12 Life with no regrets. Michael grabbed the edges and slowly climbed up the mountain, with Vidora giving him moral support from the air. Some rocks were wet and slippery, while some were rough and easy to hold onto. When Michael looked over his shoulder, everything on the ground looked eerily small. If climbing wasn't hard enough, the air was filled with ash that hindered Michael's sight. The higher he climbed the mountain, the stronger the wind breezed past him. It almost knocked him down every step of the way. After climbing for almost 5 hours, Michael's hands went numb. Michael willed the APD to pump him with a healing potion. Another hour passed as Michael climbed quite higher and finally saw a rock formation sticking out of the mountain large enough for him to sit down. "Careful!" Suddenly, Michael's hand slipped as he hung on the edge with one hand. Vidora flew closer to Michael. If it weren't for gravity, Vidora would have tried to fly to the top carrying him with their claws. Gravity in the demon's grave defied the usual physical laws. It didn't affect Michael when he was climbing. Instead, it only affected him when he tried to fly. Kane was afraid that if they tried to carry him to the top, gravity would pull them both down to the ground. At that time, all of Michael's hard world would go down the drain. "Arg," Michael growled as he slowly adjusted his grip and climbed higher. Finally, after great effort, Michael reached the platform. He slowly pulled himself up and sat on the edge. Michael breathed heavily. When he raised his head, his heart sank. The top of the mountain looked just as far as when he was at the bottom. There was still a long way to go to reach the top. Sitting on the platform, Michael was able to see most of the demon's grave. While he was riding the monster, he didn't clearly see how many salamandipeds were roaming the meadows. But now he could see them all. Hundreds of them raised their heads and hissed in the distance. As if the salamandipeds weren't enough, he noticed giant bats and a colossal-sized bull in the distance. Even from miles away, the bull looked gigantic. The bull was easily the size of a 6-story building. No monsters dared to get near the bull while it grazed the grass peacefully. "Man, I hope we don't have to fight that monster," said Sarba. He gasped in shock at the sheer size of the bull. "Who knows? We might have to," Michael's words stunned Sarba. "This place tests everything in me. This mountain is just one of the many tests I have to go through," said Michael. He was certain that this place was testing him. Despite the cultivation gap between him and the monsters, he couldn't destroy them easily as he was used to. Not that Michael was weak or nerfed by the demon's grave, but the monsters defied the typical laws of cultivation. Even a fusion stage monster was strong enough to fight a half-immortal because of their attributes. It was as though the demon's grave had tempered them and made them evolve somehow. These monsters showed signs of intelligence. A monster with intelligence was far more dangerous than one with no intelligence at the same cultivation stage. With the right strategy, even a weak monster could defeat a stronger opponent. For a few minutes, Michael just gazed at the realm before him. He collected his thoughts, calming his mind and soul. Eventually, Michael resumed climbing up the mountain with Vidora flying beside him. "Grab here. This rock looks strong." Vidora flew ahead of Michael and found sturdy rocks and edges for Michael to hold onto. They continued climbing the mountain for another hour, and then Vidora noticed something peculiar on the mountain's surface. "Look here." Sabra hovered in the air, pointing at a small rock formation that was sticking out of the mountain with a dot of red paint on it. Soon, they found another ledge with a red dot. One by one, Vidora found several rock formations that could be used as more than just holds. Before Vidora could inform Michael about their find, he fired his grappling hook onto the hold with a red dot. Surprisingly, the grappling hook coiled around the rock and let Michael pull himself higher. Since the place seemed not to have been affected by the past Dark Lord's time resetting array, Michael had a feeling his past self might have left something to help him on his way. Besides, he felt like he had climbed the mountain before. It was definitely his past self who climbed this mount and left these hook points. Did my past self really predict I would climb this mountain again? Michael questioned himself. With the hook points on the mountain's surface, Michael was able to climb faster and faster. But he didn't blindly trust the rock formations as they might have loosened with time. Therefore, Michael studied the hook points with his eyes before firing the grappling hook. Luckily, none of the hook points betrayed him, resulting in a very painful fall. Yet even with the grappling hook, climbing the mountain took Michael hours. By the time he reached halfway to the top, the place had darkened. With not enough light, Michael didn't dare to continue climbing. Coupled with volcanic ash in the air, Michael could barely see Vidora, let alone the hook points. So he decided to find a platform to rest until the light returned to the place. Right before the last light disappeared, Michael found a platform just big enough for him to sit on. His legs were hanging down along with one hand. The rock barely had enough space for him. But he was not in the position to be picky. Instead of trying to rest upon Michael's shoulder, Vidora chose to hover in the air. The last thing Vidora wanted was for the rock platform to break down when they sat on Michael. "Do you think someone else had climbed the mountain before us?" asked Sarba. "What kind of stupid question is this? Of course someone had climbed this before us. I don't know if someone had climbed to the top, but someone definitely tried. This place has been here for 5,000 years. That's a lot of years." Ayag rolled her eyes. Michael had to agree with Ayag. Although the demon's grave was treacherous to even immortals, one must be a fool to think the great 8 clans didn't dare to unveil the secrets of this realm. But he wasn't sure how farther they ventured. What must have happened here? "The woman said this place was one of my past self's mistakes." Michael slowly spoke, looking at the realm around him. Through the volcanic ash, he saw silhouettes of mountain chains, the bowl in the distance, and even a flat land that resembled a lake. He could only imagine the terrors lurking in these places. Suddenly, the mountain trembled. Michael almost bolted to his feet. But the tremor soon stopped. It felt like the volcano inside the mountain was raging to erupt. Gradually, the tremor died down as the mountain returned to its peaceful state. "People are gonna freak out when they hear we entered the demon's grave and survived," said Sarba. "Imagine what the Guardians would think. They are going to spin some story and make us the village of it." Ayag rolled her eyes. Vidora used to not care about what was happening in the world after they heard their kind was wiped out from the universe. However, they slowly realized Ghost, Gaia, and Nightmare were their family despite everything. After feeling the familial bond with them, Vidora felt they were part of Ghost's life. They cared about the Order and hated everyone who stood against them. Besides, they were intelligent enough to see who the real enemy of the world is. "Well, no matter what you do, there will always be someone to point their fingers and criticize you," said Michael. He leaned back on the mountain and gave Vidora a piece of advice about life. "Thing is, you cannot satisfy everyone. If you live your life thinking about what others might think, you won't even satisfy yourself. Never look back and regret. Look back and smile at what you have done. Live like that, said Michael with a heavy heart. If what the mysterious woman said was true, his past self had little too many regrets in his life. Even when he saw his past self talk to him in an ethereal form, Michael noticed a strong sense of regret and grief in his eyes. The past Dark Lord might have fooled the world but not Michael. After all, his past self was him. Michael wanted Vidora to have no regrets in their lives. "Why are you suddenly being so gloomy?" asked Sarba as Michael smiled, hiding his emotions well. "This place is one of my regrets, Vidora." "It's not," Sarba shook his head. "The Dark Lord who lived 5,000 years ago is not you," said Sarba. "He's literally the same person who used Time Array to travel through time," said Ayag. "There is no point in dwelling in the past. Whatever mistake my past self made, I have to own it and rectify it." Kane nodded, agreeing with Michael. Then he spoke what was in his mind. "Your past self didn't seem like the one to make mistakes. He might have wanted this place to exist, for you perhaps." Kane's words made sense to Michael as they always did. Even if his past self made a mistake, he could have fixed it with the system. But since he chose not to, Michael knew there might be a reason behind his reasoning. For the time being, Michael had to climb the mountain and get his hands on the 3 items needed to forge the pair of dark swords. Without the swords, his battle potential was being suppressed. "I think this place is strong enough. Get some sleep while you can. We will reach the top tomorrow." "You need to rest," Michael said to Vidora. Soon, Vidora flew to Michael, landing on his lap. They slowly curled up into a ball and closed their eyes. Meanwhile, Michael couldn't close his eyes. This place had an unknown effect on him. His mind kept replaying the mysterious woman's words. Chapter 8:13 Birth of the Dark Swords. The morning in the demon's grave was gloomy as ever. A tinge of light lit the horizon that looked like a red canvas. With newly found vigor, the monsters roared. Molten lava flowed out from the top, lighting the mountain with its golden light. Coupled with the morning light, the realm looked brighter than earlier. In the distance, the bats littered the red sky. Strangely, more and more bats appeared on the horizon for some reason. On the other hand, Michael and Vidora resumed their journey toward the top. The higher Michael climbed, the fewer hook points he came across. He hoped to reach the top using only the grappling hook. But on the contrary, he had to use his hands to climb more than the grappling hook. Without looking down, Michael climbed up the mountain. His entire body was drenched in sweat. "Careful," Sarba warned Michael. Despite the dry air and the heat, the mountain surface looked slimy for some reason. Grabbing the holds turned out to be a pain because of the slimy surface. Still, Michael carefully held onto the edges and moved up on the mountain. He didn't rush climbing up. Instead, he took every step with caution. Several hours passed in a blink of an eye. He had to use healing potions to keep his hands and legs from going numb. Almost 10 hours later, the top of the mountain became close to Michael. With a final use of his grappling hook, Michael climbed up to the top. After lifting his body to the top, Michael just collapsed to the ground and breathed heavily. Michael's chest rose and fell at regular intervals. Meanwhile, Vidora flew away from Michael and saw a giant hole filled with molten lava. The mountain was like a giant well, except it had lava instead of water. Just looking down into the hole made Sarba's head spin. They quickly flew back to Michael and landed on his chest. Just as they were about to ask Michael to stand up, the mountain rumbled. Soon, the lava erupted for a moment, throwing a splash of lava outside. Michael immediately kicked up to his feet. Molten lava glistened on the ground like a gooey orange cake. Ayag was tempted to have a taste, but she was not that stupid. Michael slowly walked to the edge and looked down at the boiling lava down. He felt like he was staring at the sun itself. The molten lava inside the mountain was too bright and hot enough to melt down a fusion stage warrior like a wax statue. The volcano remained dormant, hiding the terror and destruction within. Once it erupts, he could imagine how much damage it would do. Fortunately, the demon's grave was void of population. "Hey, look, your robes!" Sarba's shout broke Michael's concentration. He quickly turned around and saw his long coat was on fire due to the extreme heat in the air. Crimson-red flames engulfed his long coat as Michael immediately took it off and threw it on the floor. In a blink of an eye, the flames reduced his once stylish black long coat to nothing but ash. The long coat had been with him since his first day in this world. Vidora saw Michael squat before the pile of ash and grab a handful. "Rest in peace, old friend," said Michael. Even though it was just a lifeless piece of clothing, Michael shared a connection with it. After all, he bought it from the system when he first came to this world. At that moment, he felt like a piece of him had left him. But he could only sigh and buy another one from the system store. For now, he chose not to, as the heat would only burn it down again. At least his trousers escaped the heat, but Michael was prepared to lose them too. Once again, Michael walked to the edge to look around the mountain. According to the system, the required items to forge his dark swords were somewhere inside the mountain. Dark volcanic ash hindered Michael's eyesight. To remedy the situation, Michael simply raised his hand as a powerful gust of wind cleared the area around him of the ash. As a result, he was able to see the mountain beneath him more clearly. Finally, Michael saw the narrow pathways around the crater. These pathways were just wide enough for one man to walk. But any misstep would lead straight into the boiling volcano. Instead of dropping down the pathways, Michael flicked his wrist as a drone materialized above him. However, the drone shattered into pieces due to the intense heat. Michael hoped it wouldn't happen, but it did. The only option Michael had was personally walking the narrow pathway. Seeing no point in lingering around, Michael slowly climbed down toward the pathway. He pushed his body against the wall and slowly walked down. Step by step, Michael walked the narrow path. "If I trip down, grab me by my collar and give me a second to use the grappling hook," Michael said to Vidora. Obviously, Vidora couldn't fly away carrying Michael because then gravity would pull both of them down. But if Vidora grabbed him by his collar, it would give him a second to react and use either the teleportation scroll or the grappling hook to escape the well of molten lava beneath him. "System, can you pinpoint the location?" Michael asked the system. "How about the host paying the system 100,000 badass points to show you the entrance?" "Do it." Michael immediately agreed to the deal. Normally, Michael would have preferred finding the entrance by himself, but the situation dictated otherwise. Any misstep would be life-threatening. So he was not in the situation to bitch with the system. After the system took the agreed amount, a glow appeared in the corner of Michael's sight. A part of the walls on the other side was glowing. "Try not to fall down, host," said the system. Michael sensed a bit of sick humor in its voice. If the crater containing the lava was a circle, Michael had to go to the opposite end to reach the glow. The narrow path was already crumbling down bits and pieces at a time. But Michael surprised the system by climbing back to the top. Vidora frowned as they had no idea why Michael suddenly climbed back to the top. "What happened? You got cold feet?" Ayag tilted her head. "What are you up to, host?" The system also seemed surprised and questioned Michael. "Using my brain, that's all," Michael thought. Then he started to walk around the crater to reach the glow instead of the narrow path. The mountain's top was broader and more stable compared to the narrow path. So why did Michael have to risk himself walking the narrow path when he had a much better alternative? Except for the strong wind that tried to push him down, the current path had no downsides at all. Vidora followed behind Michael, having no idea what had just happened. "Where are you going?" asked Sarba. "Well, see," Michael mumbled as he continued on his path. Eventually, he reached directly above the glow. He took a deep breath before climbing down the mountain. In a few seconds, Michael landed on the narrow path. The glow on the mountain surface slowly faded away. But to the naked eye, the mountain surface had no strange symbols or runes. Instead, it looked brownish with the volcano ash covering its surface. Michael ran his fingers through the surface, trying to see if there was something engraved in it. Yet he found nothing. "It must be somewhere here," Michael said to himself. Then, he activated his X-ray vision. As soon as his eyes turned blue, he saw a dark square on the surface. Michael placed his palm on the dark square. Suddenly, a bolt of electricity ran down his spine through his hand. Sarba sensed the sudden spike in energy around them. Before he could question Michael, the mountain's surface trembled. To Vidora's surprise, the mountain's surface slowly creaked open like a secret door, revealing a dark corridor leading up somewhere. Michael took a deep breath before walking into the dark corridor with Vidora following him behind. After they took several steps into the corridor, the door closed behind them. Everything turned pitch black. "Do you smell that?" asked Sarba, sniffing the air. "What?" "The air. It smells like oil," said Sarba. "He is right," Michael agreed with Sarba. In addition to oil, he could also smell a tinge of metal smell in the air. To light their path ahead, Michael conjured a ball of crimson-red flames. The flames dimly lit the dark place as Michael walked through the corridor. For a while, nothing came across his path. Even Vidora didn't utter a word. Hence, silence took over them. Seconds slowly turned minutes, and each minute felt like an eternity. As much as Michael loved peace and quiet, he wanted something to happen. Otherwise, he was afraid of being bored to death. Chapter 8:14 Birth of the Dark Swords 2 Michael stepped into the forge as the hall brightened. The forge welcomed its master by providing more light and heat to the hall. Without a doubt, the place looked ancient. Everything in the forge was covered in thick ash, and some of the little tools were rusted to the point there was no chance of restoring them. Michael looked for something that might give him a clue or two about the forge's origins. While looking around the room, a large anvil drew his attention to the center of the forge. As a 5-star blacksmith, he could tell a gorgeous anvil when he saw one. He ran his fingers through the anvil, wiping off the dust on its surface. Excitement coursed through his veins as he saw the vise, a beautifully crafted piece of contraption used to hold objects securely while they were worked on. It was made of a darkish metal and seemed it could hold large and heavy objects as its jaws had a grip that could exert considerable pressure. This forge was a blacksmith's dream come true. Finally, Michael turned his gaze toward the heart of any forge, the furnace. Whoever built the forge chose to build the furnace in the wall and let the smoke go straight to the mountain's top. No one would be able to tell the difference between volcanic fumes and the smoke coming from the forge. Although the forge had many intricate gears and small contraptions inside to make it more efficient, Michael could only see the rectangle hole into which the metal ores or the ironworks should be put. On the side, Michael saw a lever and a rotating button built into the wall. "Pull the lever and see what happens," said Ayag. Her eyes glistened with curiosity, just like Sarba. Michael already had a pretty good guess of what it would do. But he pulled the lever to confirm his assumption. The lever was considerably harder to pull. It took a bit of force to pull down. A normal person had no chance of pulling down the lever since even Michael had to use his strength. After he pulled down the lever, nothing happened for a while. Then, the forge trembled slightly. The temperature in the air rose by several degrees. A gust of wind shot out of the furnace, pushing out the ash. The furnace suddenly lit up as gooey lava oozed into it from above. It was like hot chocolate except hotter and brighter, like liquid gold. Michael immediately felt the intense heat from the lava. On the other hand, the rotating button had an arrow pointing up. He rotated the button anti-clockwise, expecting it would somehow reduce the heat. An oven, that was what this furnace reminded him of. After rotating the button, a strong gust of wind mixed with cold air sprayed onto the lava. Gradually the lava lost its heat and became bearable. "I wonder where that cold air is coming from," Kane frowned. With the metal bar in his hand, Michael looked around. He noticed a cauldron near the furnace. Vidora flew to the cauldron and carried it to Michael in their claws. "Let's begin." Michael removed his black arm cut and threw it to the side. It restricted his movements. Then, Michael placed the 2 metal bars into the cauldron. After he placed the 2 metal bars into the cauldron, it became too heavy for Vidora to carry. Hence, Michael carried the cauldron to the furnace and hung it above the hot lava. When he hung the cauldron, he noticed a pipe hanging directly above the cauldron. He followed the pipe to the table in the center. Strange enough, there was another pipe hanging with its end open. "Hey Ghost, look. There's a symbol engraved in here," Sarba raised his voice, hovering beside the dark metal pipe. Michael came to take a closer look at the pipe. As Sarba said, there was a tiny symbol engraved in the pipe. He could make out a shape like D in flames. Dark flames? Michael questioned himself as he conjured the dark flames. The temperature in the forge rose by several degrees as soon as the dark flames appeared. Michael pushed the dark flames into the metal pipe. To his surprise, the metal pipe hanging above the cauldron released a purple flame into the cauldron. Somehow, the ancient ice core tempered the dark flames and released purplish flames on the other end. This purple flame wasn't as hot and violent as the dark flames, but it still had the characteristics of the dark flames. The purple flames heated the cauldron in a blink of an eye. Soon, the cauldron turned dim orange on the edges. But when Michael stopped sending dark flames into the pipe, the purple flames stopped at the other end. Michael didn't think he would need to send dark flames to melt all the metals. The hot lava was hot enough to achieve that feat. However, the dark metal required dark flames. Having no other option, Michael sent a stream of dark flames into the metal pipes. Several runes in the metal pipe lit up, protecting them from melting down under the dark flames' intense heat. Several hours passed by in a blink of an eye. When Vidora flew closer to the cauldron, they saw the dark metal bars finally melting down. Surprisingly, tiny crimson-red lightning bolts crackled around the cauldron. They formed from gooey dark metal. Everything around the cauldron darkened as the forge trembled. Michael ignored the tremor and continued to send dark flames into the pipe. As a blacksmith, he knew when to stop sending the dark flames and let the metal cool off for a while. The forging of dark swords was very different from typical sword forging. Almost an hour later, Michael moved away from the metal pipe. Then he searched for a metal block and found one buried deep under all the rusted tools and metal works. He carried the block of metal on his shoulder and put it on the table with a loud thud. Due to the forge's heat, Michael was sweating bullets. But he enjoyed himself working as a blacksmith. The metal block was a long rectangle with 3 meters long and 1 meter wide. In addition, it was at least 10 inches thick. Under Vidora's curious gaze, Michael fired dark beams out of his eyes and created a sword shape hollow in the metal block. The shape was neither too long nor too short. After the metal bars melted, he would have to pour the liquid metal into the shape and harden the metal. Since he was about to forge 2 swords, Michael found another metal block and repeated the process, except the second sword was just a few inches longer than the first. As Michael was preparing everything to forge his new swords, the braziers around him flickered. Michael put down the tongs and looked around the place. For some reason, the flames above the braziers dimmed out. Then, Michael felt everything go dead silent. To Michael's surprise, a holographic image of himself appeared right above the table he was working on. "Welcome to our forge," said the Dark Lord. Chapter 8:15. Birth of the Dark Swords 3. The sudden appearance of the past Dark Lord surprised Michael. But deep down, he expected the Dark Lord to leave a holographic recording of himself. The moment Michael stepped into the forge, he felt like he owned this place. For a few seconds, the Dark Lord's image flickered in the air. The device he left had been lying dormant for thousands of years. It was a miracle the device was still in working condition. "I knew you would find the forge. Listen carefully. By the time of this recording, I don't know how long this message will last or when you will reach the place," said the Dark Lord. He talked to Michael with his hands behind his back. Unlike earlier, the Dark Lord looked relieved and even had a smile on his face. "I have made some mistakes. That's what makes me human. But soon, everything would go back to normal. I hope you have found some of the armor pieces I left behind. Find them all and forge yourself a new one. Trust me, you will need it soon. I know you will feel frustrated by all the cryptic messages. To be honest, I do too. But this time array and time travel are not as simple as we think. Even now, I can't tell you my whole story as much as I want to. Our friend strictly ordered me not to." The Dark Lord emphasized the words "our friend." Michael had a feeling he was talking about the system. Since the system itself ordered him not to reveal his story, Michael couldn't blame the past Dark Lord. The Dark Lord smiled. Michael was pleased to see his past self smile. This forge is my gift to you, along with my hammer. You need it to forge powerful weapons and armor. If my guess is right, you might be in a financial mess, and that's why you are here in the first place. When this recording is over, you will receive something that will open up a portal directly to this forge. But you must build a powerful portal in your castle first if you hadn't already. The Dark Lord paused for a moment and looked around as though he was searching for something. Meanwhile, Michael was delighted to hear he could travel to the demon's grave and to the forge from his castle. It seemed like his past self was more powerful and resourceful than he initially thought, which made Michael wonder more about what the hell happened that pushed him to reset the entire universe. He had a feeling it was connected to Gaia but didn't know the whole story behind the past Dark Lord's reasoning. Where the hell did it go? The past Dark Lord searched for something frantically. A few seconds later, he turned his focus back to Michael. The monsters you fought on your way here, they were modified by an asshole to fight me. Of course, I could kill them with a snap, but I don't think it would be true for you. So tread carefully. And keep Vidora out of trouble. I really miss the time when they were tiny and cute. The grown-up Vidora. The past Dark Lord sighed and let out an exhausted smile. Vidora frowned as Iag almost hissed at the Dark Lord. After your trip to the demon's grave, I hope they still call the place that. Your life will get a whole lot tougher. But hey, race, a piece of advice from yourself to you. Not everything is black and white. Also, don't always go for the kill. Some of our enemies are far more valuable alive than dead. As he said, the Dark Lord turned around and walked to his work table. Due to some reason, Michael couldn't clearly see the table or what he was working on. The time had corroded the recording and made it impossible to see anything other than the Dark Lord. This array will fix everything, Michael heard the Dark Lord mumble. Then, he turned around once again. What else I thought about telling you? The Dark Lord rubbed his chin for a moment. Yes. The Dark Lord snapped his finger, showing his sudden realization. Finish your castle as soon as you can and spare no expense. You have no idea how many tried to penetrate mine and lost their lives. Sooner or later, you will get tired of all the killings. The Dark Lord paused as his expression grew darker. Don't get tired. Because you are just starting your life as the Dark Lord. Always provide a reason for the people to fear you, my lord. Suddenly, Michael heard another voice. It sounded wise and elderly, but he had heard this voice before. Eladir? Michael frowned. He sounded old, very old. Are you recording another message for yourself again? Eladir asked the Dark Lord like a strict father. Unfortunately, Michael couldn't see Eladir in the recording. Hey, is that Eladir I am hearing? Iag asked Cain and Sarba in a husky voice. I think so, Sarba nodded. You cannot leave these messages everywhere, my lord. It will create unwanted branches in the timeline. You already took a big risk by breaking down your armor and leaving them behind. Who knows what catastrophe it's going to bring? Eladir yelled at the Dark Lord. Look on the bright side, Eladir. We won't be here to see it, the Dark Lord shrugged. Come on. Finish what you are doing. We have a lot to do in a short time, said Eladir. You became grumpier with age. Relax and give me some time alone with myself. The Dark Lord looked over his shoulder and winked at Michael. The Dark Lord waited until Eladir left the room. Huff, the Dark Lord sighed. I am going to miss many things, but grumpy Eladir is not one of them. Try to find a way to stop him from getting older, because you do not want him to. Trust me, the Dark Lord chuckled. Who am I kidding? I am going to miss that old elf. It feels good to have someone look you in the eyes and lecture you, said the Dark Lord. At the peak of his life, no one dared even look at him, let alone lecture him. Almost the entire world trembled at the mere mention of his name. The black liquid ran through the hollow, slowly taking the shape of a sword. After filling both metal blocks, Michael placed the cauldron on the floor. A typical blacksmith would wait for the liquid to harden, but Michael was anything but typical. Hence, he took out his Doombringer and summoned Frost to cool down the black liquid. The black liquid sizzled as tiny red lightning bolts cracked around the metal block. Somehow, the dark metal created these tiny lightning bolts. These lightning bolts crackled around the black liquid like tiny guardians. Michael focused the frost beam toward the black liquid, tempering the metal. Even with the frost beam, the black liquid took hours before slowly starting to harden. He then grabbed the hammer, preparing to douse the dark swords into hot lava and shape it up. Michael stood there on edge, a step away from falling down. Due to the intense heat coming from the boiling lava, the droplets were vaporized before they could even reach the lava. Still, the vapor created a thick white mist around Mount Hades. Look, Iag pointed at the horizon as Michael saw a giant bat flying in his direction. As though the dark swords had sensed the threat, they produced more lightning bolts. These bolts crackled around the sheath as well as Michael. Cracking his neck, Michael took a step forward, dropping down from the mountain. Gravity pulled him down with enough force to create a large crater in the ground when he landed. If someone else fell from the mountain, their bones would have shattered to pieces, and their body would have turned into bloody mush. But Michael comfortably landed on his feet. He slowly walked forward as the bat flew closer and closer to Michael. The bat was at a half-immortal stage, several times stronger than the bat he fought outside the demon's grave. Michael unsheathed his dark swords and waited for the bat to attack him. The bat was big enough to cast a large shadow on the ground. When it flew closer to him, Michael heard a strange noise coming from its mouth. He stood still as the bat dived down to rip him apart with its claws. Finally, the bat was just a few meters away from Michael's head. In a blink of an eye, Michael threw the dark sword at the bat. The sword soared through the air like a bullet and went straight through the bat's chest. Blood splattered on the ground as the bat had a hole in its chest. The sword went clean through its chest and came outside. The bat roared in pain before crashing down to the ground. Screaming in pain, the bat flapped its wings frantically. But no matter how hard it tried to fly away, the bat simply couldn't. The dark sword penetrated its very heart. Vidora snickered at the bat as the bat roared with its eyes burning with pain and rage. Then, Vidora flew away to pick up the dark sword Michael threw. While Michael made his way to the bat with the second dark sword in his hand, the bat crawled backward in fear. Tsk. Michael showed his disapproval of the bat's actions by shaking his head. The bat could have avoided death if it chose to fly the other way. Although the past Dark Lord warned him about killing the monsters recklessly, he would not let go of those who attacked him alive. Since the bat tried to kill him, it was only fair that he return the favor. By the time Michael was just an arm-reaching distance from the bat, Vidora had returned to him carrying his other sword in its legs. The bat groaned as Michael pressed its claws under his feet. When Michael clenched the swords tighter, the engravings on the blade lit up. He just swung the dark swords as the bat's head flew off of its shoulder. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a half-immortal stage level 4 monster. The reward is 1 million experience points and 25,000 badass points. Michael heard the system in his head. These dark swords were powerful enough to kill any immortals. They didn't need to be infused with an immortal bone like a typical immortal killing weapon. It took Michael only one swing to cut the bat's head clean off. Without its head, the bat's body violently twitched, splashing blood all over the place. Only then did Michael realize how powerful his swords were. He regretted not forging them way earlier. With these swords, his battle prowess shot through the roof. Vidora was stunned to see the dead bat on the ground. The battle literally lasted for a few seconds. Outside the demon's grave, the fusion stage bat gave Michael a headache as Iag had to use her power to disrupt its powers. But now, Michael killed the bat in a few seconds. After killing the bat, Michael flicked his sword, removing the blood on the blade. It's a pity. I was thinking of covering the blades with the dark flames, Michael sighed. Not to jinx the situation, but I have a feeling we will come across more monsters on our way, said Sarba. Speaking of which, where are we going next? Asked Iag. To a gold mine, said Michael. For instance, the system gave no explanation or answers about the mysterious woman he met outside the demon's grave. Sometimes, Michael had to figure things out on his own without the system's help. "I hope you like getting wet," said Michael as Iag rolled her eyes. "I just said I hate getting wet." "You are a jerk, Ghost," she bit Michael's ear. Nibbling Iag's head, Michael walked closer and closer to the lake. With a flick of his wrist, Michael took out a sapphire blue pill and tossed it into his mouth. His muscles immediately ached, especially the back of his ears. It felt like someone was burning his skin with cigarettes. The pain lasted for a few minutes. Then, Vidora saw several gashes appearing behind his ears. Without wasting any time, Michael dived into the lake, swimming deeper and deeper. As his body moved through the clear water, he was surprised to see the golden sand and the sight around him. The first thing that caught his eye was the variety of sea life. Hundreds of fishes in every color of the rainbow and more swam past him without fearing him. Some big fishes floated lazily as others disappeared with a flick of a bright fin. For a lake in a demon's grave, it was artistic, to say the least. Luckily, Vidora didn't need any pill or potion to breathe underwater. They swam along with Michael like expert swimmers. As they were following Michael, their attention turned to the expanse of a coral reef that stretched as far as one could see. They blanketed the golden sand like a colorful bedsheet. Surprisingly, everything underwater was full of color and life. The red light coming from the dark swords illuminated the closest section of the reef, highlighting a formation of corals. Each section of coral was beautifully formed, but none was quite like any other. Michael was tempted to harvest some and put them in the lake near the castle. However, Michael was the type of person who would rather see a flower in a plant than in someone's head. "What is that?" Iag asked her siblings in telepathy, looking at an octopus. The creature peeked its head over through the coral and gawked at them with its big eyes. Soon, the octopus moved through the coral, revealing itself for a moment before shrinking back into a crevasse. A hidden gem amongst corals, one of many. The deeper Michael swam, the prettier the lake turned out to be. Many unknown creatures buried themselves under the sand. The entire lake was like a treasure chest, enclosing unfathomable treasures in ever smallest sliver. Everything was deadly silent around Michael. But this silence was short-lived. Suddenly, they heard a chittering noise. When Michael looked over his shoulder, he saw 5 creatures that resembled dolphins skim by. With water all around them, they almost seemed to fly, moving effortlessly, propelling their sleek bodies swiftly forwards with a flick of a gray tail. According to the system, Michael still had a long way to reach his destination. Chapter 8:18. The Wood Elves and the World of Itnes. The world of Itnes was primitive and inhabited by a race called Zoralines. They were later named the Wood Elves by the Dark Lord. Although the world was affected by the time array when the Dark Lord reset the universe, there were still some remnants of the Dark Lord in Itnes. They worshipped him as their only god. Until 2 years ago, the Wood Elves lived peacefully without major wars. However, everything changed one day. The barrier that kept Itnes hidden from the outside world broke as the soldiers of Skyhall invaded their world and slaughtered thousands of Wood Elves. The Wood Elves fought the Skyhall army with primitive bows and arrows, while the Skyhall used high-powered weapons such as cannons, trebuchets, and wyverns. At that moment, Taskin, a young warrior from the Forest tribe, was risking his life to steal medicine for the wounded villagers and his teammates back home. He was accompanied by his wife, Thilv, and 4 comrades. The Wood Elves called the Skyhall soldiers by the name demons since they brought death and destruction wherever they went. Like most of the Wood Elves, Taskin had coppery skin and hazel eyes. His hair was jet black with a hue of copper red. Compared to the Elves and Dark Elves, Wood Elves were slightly taller and had pointier ears. Contrary to those elves, Wood Elves were kind and friendly. They would have formed an alliance with Skyhall and happily offered them valuable resources if Skyhall chose the path of diplomacy. But no, Skyhall waged war and slaughtered thousands of them without a shred of mercy. All of those deaths and destruction were for the natural resources Itnes possessed. This world was once treasured by the Dark Lord himself, and Skyhall had no clue the Dark Lord was on his way to save the world from them. Taskin and his group were walking through a bluish, ancient forest. It reeked of age. Its woody incense was from centuries of snapping branches crashing to the forest's floor and rotting silently. The composting, organic smell rose up in waves like a miasma. Every sprawling tree they passed under reminded Taskin of a watchful guardian, a silent sentinel of the groves. Taskin and his team used branches and veins to traverse through the forest without making a noise. They knew the forest like the back of their hand. The Skyhall soldiers used contraptions to traverse through the forest when they were in a good mood. Otherwise, they would burn down everything in their path just to travel hundreds of meters into the forest. Hundreds of ancient trees with unlimited potential turned to ashes in their hands. Taskin and his team were on their way to the forest center, where the mother tree was. The mother tree was the oldest in the world, spanning hundreds of acres. The wood elves had a ritual of climbing the mother tree, which would take months. Countless wood elves lost their lives trying to reach the top. The wood elves believed they could get the mother tree's blessing and hear their god's voice by reaching the top. The deeper Taskin and his team went, the more mystical and spellbinding the forest became. Huge roots spread-eagled the ground, twisting like the great backs of sea dinosaurs. The foliage became thick and lush, forming an arch of fairy-tale sapphire blue above their heads. Arthritic boughs, gnarled with age, dripped their bounty of nuts onto the path. Briars, brambles, and berry trees flanked the trail, making it impenetrable on either side. Shuffling noises came from deep in the interior, deadened by the cunningly woven web of leaves. A troop of winged badgers crossed the winding trail in front of them at one point. They were finishing up their early morning foraging and looked startled to see the wood elves. As if on cue, a blue feather bird erupted from the knot of trees. Soon, a few more of its beaked companions joined the flock, creating a symphony of song. The heart-haunting melody was an elixir for the soul. Their melody used to soothe the wood elves' souls. But after the demons appeared, these birds cried more often than they sang. Despite the ash and smell of blood in the air, the sap-sweet fragrance of the forest washed over them. Finally, Taskin arrived at a wide glade, where the ancient trees fell away, revealing the bespeckled blue sky. The last of the morning's stars were glinting like silver earrings, luminous and bright. An orgold moon with a blue ring hung quietly in the distance, casting a honeyed sheen over the trees. Taskin and his men sat their backs against a lightning-blasted tree trunk and watched the demon castle in the distance. The demons scorched hundreds of trees, and everything lived in the area to build their castle and the surrounding buildings. Taskin could still hear the cries of his people when the demons first arrived. They built the castle with the wood they got from the mother tree's branches and the roots as defensive walls. Once, a holy site turned into a burial site for thousands of wood elves. Since the Skyhall sent a total of 1,000 soldiers, they were able to build a castle in a month. The castle had 11 broad, square towers connected by large, thin walls made of blue marble stones they mined in Itnes. To mine those stones, the Skyhall slaughtered an entire tribe that protected and lived in the mines for centuries. Small windows were scattered generously around the walls in seemingly perfect symmetry, along with symmetric crenellations for archers and artillery to shoot down the wood elves who dared to get near the mother tree. A huge gate with heavy metal doors guarded the castle. It was the only easy way in. Any other side would be futile. Various barracks, camps, and small buildings were scattered outside the castle gates. The Wood Elves were a God-fearing race that worshipped the Dark Lord for thousands of years. They didn't see him, but they worshipped his statues, which protected them for centuries. However, after the demons invaded them and slaughtered thousands, some of the Wood Elves like Taskin lost their trust in the Dark Lord. One couldn't blame them for losing faith in a higher power after witnessing their race being pushed to the brink of extinction. Taskin had no faith in a god who didn't raise a finger against the demons, unlike his wife. Eventually, Vaikok finished his recon and returned to them. 20 fully armored guards on the way to the infirmary, Vaikok reported back to Taskin. "Did you see the healing potions?" asked Thilv as Vaikok nodded. But he didn't have any excitement or even the slightest joy in his eyes. Instead, Vaikok seemed like something had affected him deeply. "What did you see, Vaikok?" "He is here, Taskin," said Vaikok with a grave tone. His eyes contained fear and worry like never before. "General Tar?" asked Taskin as the others looked terrified except for Thilv, whose eyes burned with rage and bloodlust. Reports said he was looking for something in the mines. Taskin creased his brows. This mission got a whole lot tougher with Tar being on the castle ground. If this were any other day, Taskin would have opted to back off. But today, he must retrieve those potions. His brother's life depended on the healing potion. Taskin slowly opened the door after looking back and forth. When the door slowly opened, they saw a couple of soldiers sleeping on white beds. These soldiers seemed pale, shivering and gritting their teeth as though they were in great pain. While Taskin's gaze was locked on the 6 soldiers, Thilv and the others noticed the crate full of glistening green vials. "There it is." Vaikok closed the door behind them and pointed at the crate. "Let's take it and get the hell out of this place," another wood elf behind Thilv said. When Thilv was about to take a step toward the crate, Taskin stopped her by her wrist. "If they have the magical healing potions, why do these soldiers look sick?" asked Taskin. As much as the Thilv and the others wanted to take the healing potions and escape the place, Taskin's words made them wonder and think deeply about what he had just said. Vaikok and the others creased their brows. They knew Taskin was right. These magical healing potions could cure anything, yet these soldiers looked anything but healthy. On top of that, the healing potions were right on the table, and the crate contained enough potions for all the soldiers in the room. Yet, for some reason, the demons chose not to give the potions to their comrades. "We can think about it when we get back to the tribe. Let's just take them and get the hell out of here," Vaikok rushed Taskin. Seeing no other choice, Thilv quickly dashed to the crate and took it in her hand. On her way back, she wanted to kill the 6 soldiers. But luckily for them, Thilv prioritized escaping the place over slitting their throats. Taskin turned around to leave the building. He threw one last gaze over his shoulder at the soldiers before opening the door. The moment he opened the door, Taskin's body went rigid. His heart almost jumped out of his chest. To their shock, General Tar was waiting outside to welcome them with his 5 gray wolves. General Tar was a brutish, aggressive, ugly, and malevolent orc, contrasting with the wood elves. He had several piercings all over his body and wore a necklace made of his enemy's ears. He held a heavy sword as tall as an average human on his shoulder. When General Tar saw Taskin and his team, he showed an ugly smile that really highlighted his blood-stained teeth and the tusks sticking out of his mouth. The gray wolves bore their teeth with their blue eyes glimmering with ferocity. They were one signal away from ripping Taskin and the others apart. Each wolf was 5 feet wide and tall as a wood elf's waist. Saliva trickled down their mouths as though Taskin and his men were juicy pieces of meat. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit?" General Tar had a perfect brutish voice for his monstrous body. He slowly ran his hand through the deep scar on his left cheek. Tar almost went blind in one eye. If Taskin swung the sword a few inches higher and Tar would have lost his left eye. Tar wore the scar as a symbol of shame.